Hey everyone, Christopher Ruocchio here, author of the Sun Eater Science Fantasy Series, an 8-year veteran of the publishing industry, back for the third and final of these sort of book release discussion streams. Demon in White is out in trade paperback today, and as I said the past 2 weeks, rather than play the role of dear leader and make everyone talk about how good the book is, because that's weird, I thought we would just talk about something so that I had an excuse to tell everybody that the book is out in paperback. So this week I am joined by a bunch of friends of mine. Mike of Mike's Book Reviews, and Dan from Treebead Books, and my good friend Dave Butler, author of the Witchy War series and editor of Disquiet Gods, as well as many hat wearer. So, gentlemen, thanks.
We should talk about how good Book 6 is.
We could troll people and talk about Book 6. That's true.
It's really good.
So good. We got all the arcs and
it's really good.
Oh yeah, I read it 2 years ago, guys.
That was before I wrote it.
Yeah, I know. This is a sci-fi show, right? I mean, come on.
It was beamed into the past.
Then you get the email from Christopher earlier this week. So by the way, I've started book 7, so watch out for that too.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Yeah, I read that one too.
Yeah.
Now I have to race Pierce Brown or something, right? Like when is he due out? Does he have a date already? Because if he does,
just text him, ask him the date, so you guys can put it out at the same time. Maybe you can have a signing, but then we would have to see both of you at the same place at the same time. Has anybody ever seen you two at the same place at the same time? I think not.
Yeah, well, I'm not so sure we're the same person. He's a lot handsomer than I am. No. Maybe I'm Pierce Brown in a fat suit. That's a possibility.
I think you're being too tough
not
on
allowed
yourself. I think you're a handsome man, sir. Jeez.
But that's my disguise. But yeah. So the issue on the table, as it were, although it's not really like an argument or anything, is I always say science fantasy series because I don't want people to like expect math in the book. But this leads people to ask the question all the time about where that line is, right? And like we all like science fiction, we all like fantasy. So like where is that line, right? Like this is just one of those perennial questions. And I thought we would just sort of talk about what we think the difference is between the two genres. Is there a difference? I sometimes think they're the same thing personally, because I'm that guy. But I just thought that'd be a good place to start. Do you guys think that what do you think the difference is between science fiction and fantasy? And where do you think that line is?
Dragons or spaceships? That's mine.
Pretty much dragons or spaceships.
Oh man, we all agree. Never mind. All right, we can all go home.
All right, good stream, guys.
I think it's like that. Isn't it like all science fiction is fantasy, but not all fantasy is science fiction kind of thing?
How do you mean?
I don't know. Like it's kind of hard to like think about it. Like it's like look at Discworld too, for example, right? Like it's a giant turtle flying through space on a back of elephants and all that stuff, and it's like, is that science fiction? But it's really kind of fantasy. But this whole world is like built on someone flying through space. So, it's a tough line. Like I'm rereading Dune right now because I thought the movie was coming out in October.
It was supposed to be, I think, early November.
But Warner Brothers is going to teach us a lesson, guys.
Right. So yeah, I'm rereading. Well, I'm actually doing the audiobook right now for Dune, and like that really toes that line so hard so early on. Like like there's that science fiction element to it, but it still feels like epic fantasy, and for me, and that's kind of how Sun Eater feels like in that vein as well.
You think it's like more like a tone thing, almost then, like
I think so.
Just sort of, in terms of like audience expectations, because I think a lot of people think that science fiction is like harder than fantasy in some way, and maybe that's because there is a perception, and sometimes it's more accurate than others, that like science fiction is based on something real, right? It's like, oh, there's math and stuff, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, I don't understand this quantum physics thing, and sometimes some writers, I'm not going to say who, one of them is totally in the room, will use the word quantum and they mean just whatever, right? It's sort of papered over as an excuse, and it really just means magic sometimes, because the number of not every person who writes science fiction is works for NASA or something, right? We can't all be Alistair Reynolds. I certainly am not, but I think that a lot of people think that science fiction is harder for this reason. I think they think that it's got this sort of basis in reality that fantasy doesn't have, which is also not true, right? Like fantasy is actually based in reality to a certain degree, whether like it's based in, I don't know, like European history or another part of the world, right? Asian history or whatever, right? You can't, there's not really a fantasy book that's like completely removed from things that are real, right? And often I think the books that get that way like are even harder to read, because it's one thing to say picture it like a castle, and another thing to say like picture a I don't know, a blurg, right? I don't know what a blurg is.
A rockbud, an axe hound.
Yeah, or even like just trying to put in scope like a 3-kilometer like spaceship. Like, how do you do that? Like that. Whereas like, yeah, a castle is a lot easier to picture, a dragon's a lot easier to picture. But when someone says, "Oh, that spaceship's 8 miles long," it's like, oh, I can't fathom something that large.
Yeah, it's too much, right? I think related point too is that I think some people think science fiction is harder because fantasy has a bit more of like a sort of standard canvas that people draw from. Like, oh, we're doing dragons, right? Like, are they like, we're talking like Chinese dragons, or are we talking like Western dragons? We got the 2 legs, 4 legs. Like, that's basically like we've covered all of our bases, right? People don't need you to describe a dragon in as much detail as they do whatever weird alien monster you've made up. So I think maybe that's where some of the difficulty comes in. But I mean, I think the essential difference that like people normally talk about is just that, right? That we're at least trying to have some sort of scientific accuracy, or at least to inspire an interest in science. Because like Gernsback, when he started Amazing, was it Amazing or Amazing? Wanted all of his writers to be credentialed, right? Because he wanted the stories to like have some scientific merit, on the basis that this meant parents would buy the stories for their kids, right? And we've like totally like thrown that away, right? But I think that there is this sort of expectation that there's like some marginal educational value.
So like it's kind of almost like, I guess you see like some science fiction can be a lot really like very pedantic. Like you have to be taught like what's going on to understand really what's happening in the story. Like, oh, this is how this spaceship works. And I found that sometimes can be pedantic, unless it's like Warhammer 40K, where it's just like everything's shit, everything's war, and then just kill stuff. Like, that one's like, that's like pretty simple sci-fi, where like it knows exactly what it is.
So I have a hypothesis, which will offer an explanation of science fantasy, and also for Brandon Sanderson. So obviously at the sort of how do you sell things, like what bookshelf does this go on at the bookstore level? I think the answer is like, does it have swords and dragons, or does it have spaceships, right? And so is science fantasy then just mean, well, you have both, right? And that's not a wrong answer, but I think we can say other things that are maybe also interesting. Because I think there's a question about, well, why would we have enough stories about spaceships? What is there about stories about spaceships or stories about swords and dragons that a whole literature would coalesce around these things, right? And I think there's something interesting going on in fantasy literature that is different from what's going on in science fiction. So I here's my hypothesis. Okay. It's the 2 hemispheres of the brain is one way to think about it. Fantasy is the hemisphere of is the literature of the right brain. It's speculative. It's the what if fiction that says, let me take all of the uncorrelated and unseen data in the world, right? That I can't perceive them consciously, but my unconscious mind perceives them and aggregates them and helps me navigate through them, and let me explore those by literature. So it is the literature of archetype. It's the literature of the human spirit. It's the literature of religion, the what if literature of human spirituality. It's the literature of the right brain, right? Whereas science fiction is a very left-brained kind of literature. Science fiction is, let me write stories. It's core. Like, yes, there's a broader circle in which stories just have ray guns and spaceships in them, right? But hard science fiction, the core of science fiction is, stories where science somehow matters to the resolution of the plot. Science is important to the theme, an idea about science, right? An idea about this hypothesis, this idea, this construction, this miniature partial construction of reality that I can focus on, right? Which is very left-brained activity. I think that's what the real difference between fantasy and science fiction is. And so I would say, science fantasy is actually fantasy, except that it looks like science fiction because it has the ray guns and spaceships. But it is the language of the right brain. It is analogy. It is the exploration of archetype. It is trying to look into our unconscious mind and make explicit by metaphor and by heroic storytelling arc connections and ideas that we can't reach directly with our rational minds at first, right? And I think Brandon Sanderson, whatever you call him, is the inverted. I think he's actually left brain fiction, it's science fiction, but it's dressed up in fantasy. It's swords and horses, but the magic is not analogy and archetype. The magic is, if I have 4 green pebbles, I can fly, and if I can touch a blue pebble, then I can. Right? It's false scientific hypothesis. That's what I think. That's what I think science fantasy is.
Yeah, all these answers are way more intelligent than mine. Real easy. Do you got orcs and goblins and elves and dwarves? I'm probably leaning fantasy. Do you got aliens and interstellar travel? I'm usually leaning sci-fi. So I've gotten grilled for this for years because I said Dune's called the best-selling science fiction book of all time because it's science fiction, but never enough to where I've been like, oh, if you call it sci-fantasy, you're wrong. I also call Star Wars science fiction, and a lot of people call that sci-fantasy. So I don't know. I'm just real big about, is it sci-fi? Is it fantasy? Or is it horror? It's when you start combining all these genres and making these new subgenres. Like when I said, hey, Anne Rice is one of my favorite horror novelists. Like, well, actually, Anne Rice is a gothic horror novelist. What the fuck is the difference? To me, it's real cut and dry. If it's a horror book, I don't care if it takes place on a spaceship, like Alien, Ridley Scott Alien. That's a sci-fi movie because it takes place in space, right? But it's listed as a horror movie. This makes a lot of sense to me. But to me, it's like, okay, it's outer space. There's aliens. That's science fiction to me. So, like I said, my answer isn't going to be as intelligent as everyone else's here because I don't know which part of the brain I use, left or right. Maybe neither. I don't know. But
floating in the middle, yeah.
Whatever comes up, and what just comes up is says, hey, if there's arrows, fantasy. If there's lasers, sci-fi. So.
Well, the thing is, like, the way I look at it is like they're all in the same part of the book, like the bookstore, right? You walk down the fantasy aisle, and like the sci-fi aisle is right next to it too, right there. They're like brother and sister essentially. Like they're kind of peas in the same pot, and like it's maybe just we don't need to attach too many labels to it, right? Like you can enjoy the elements of one and the other, right? And that's kind of maybe like with Sun Eater why I like it. It has that, like, I don't want to listen to Hadrian explain how a spaceship works. That's not what Hadrian's function is, right? He's that epic hero in that sci-fantasy story.
He also has no idea.
He has no idea, yeah.
You make it sound like he knows, I'm sure.
He knows the way that, like airplanes go up, right? Like, it's like, oh, the air goes over the wing. Yeah, okay.
I'll just stand here and brood.
Yeah, I'm gonna stare out the window and just listen to Sound of Silence on loop. But yes, I mean,
Christopher, before we move on, I will say that God Emperor Dune, I don't know, that one might be fantasy. So I think sometimes you can start to slide towards a little something else. But I think it really, in the end, it's just what sci-fi author doesn't like fantasy, what fantasy author doesn't like sci-fi. Hey, I like all these things. Let me put them in a blender and see what happens. So sure, I would say sci-fantasy can, like when you say, hey, Sun Eater Saga is sci-fantasy, I'm never like, fuck you, Christopher, you're wrong. It's science fiction. I've never done that once. I will now, just because I want to see.
Well, I deserve it. I set myself up for it.
But I think it's fair. I just
go move his book from the other shelf to the. You're going on.
Yeah, I gotta go rearrange my whole library now. Gosh, I got your stuff with the science fiction. I got to go put it over here now. Damn.
Man, I really hate that Barnes and Noble split them up because invariably I am in like the other one each time I go into a store. Like they just keep putting me in weird places. It's like, oh, I'm in the science fiction section this time, so I'll go in and it'll be like, oh, they have none of my books, and then actually they're over there. I'm like, you jerks. It was better when they were all together, I think. But because I do, I mean, I think you're right, Dan. I think there's a lot of crossover in terms of readership. But my understanding, and I think Dave, you can back me up on this, right? Is that
Done. You're backed up.
thanks. Is that fantasy is like just much bigger, right? In terms of like overall readership, right? Science fiction is substantially more niche. And so, I mean, that Venn diagram like isn't it's not two circles, but one of those circles is certainly smaller than the other. And that may be for like all sorts of reasons, right? I won't begin to speculate, but I mean, I think
that sci-fi was more popular pre-Tolkien and fantasy's been more popular post-Tolkien. Tolkien.
Token.
Because I feel like a lot of the classic sci-fi I see is like right before Lord of the Rings. That like where everybody's like I did my video recently about popular fantasy, but it's like the greatest hits that I've never read, and a lot of them are either right there before or right during that time period, and then it seemed like fantasy really just kind of exploded after that.
I think that might be true. I think I saw Liam in the chat, so Liam can maybe back me up on this. But I think most of the really successful pulp magazines tended towards at least. Like maybe it was the ray gun kind of science fiction, right? But I think there was maybe more stuff that looked, science fiction-y. But the other thing though is that like before not before Tolkien, like he was like the the Jesus that like turned the epoch over, right? But like some of the earlier stuff, they didn't really distinguish the way that like we do now, right? Like H.P. Lovecraft used to be the sort of mascot of the World Fantasy Award, right? The award was literally a bust of his head. It's a tree now, but that was because at the time they sort of thought of him as a fantasy writer, right? When they like set everything up, because it was kind of all fantasy, right? There was what Gernsback was doing with scientific fiction, right, which turned into science fiction, but like the weird stuff, right, like Lovecraft, like Clark Ashton Smith, or like some of the more like some of the like proto horror stuff, right, was sort of all lumped into this sort of one category. So maybe it just wasn't as differentiated. And I think because like certainly I think the genres have gotten more differentiated as time has gone on, right? You've got you've got to split up horror into gothic and cosmic and whatever else, right? Sword and sorcery, right? And there's like there's this whole like family tree, and like some of the branches like cross back over, and it's like, oh, this is actually like right in the middle of these two things. And then we invent like 87 kinds of punk, which complaining about last week, but I think that early on it was sort of a lot more unified, and as things have evolved, they've sort of speciated, right, in kind of like a Darwinian sort of way. Because now, I said this last week, but I remember talking to Kevin J. Anderson once, and who I know is your favorite guy, Mike. But
he wrote good Star Wars books. Good Star Wars books.
But he was talking about how like as a metal fan, right? That has the same problem. There's 800 kinds of metal. He can only listen to his favorite flavor for the rest of his life, and he doesn't have to like branch out anymore. And that's perfect from like a consumer angle. But I think that something's been lost. By putting up all these fences, I think people are less likely to take risks and read stuff they wouldn't in a vacuum. I think it was easier early on to sort of accidentally read something that you wouldn't have normally read.
I think like because people see them as like big commitments now, books, right? You speak to people at work, or you speak to people, you just meet in public, right? And like, oh, like reading a book a year is like huge for some of them, right? And it's like, I got to pick the thing that like I'm going to jam with the best, or I'm not going to waste my time.
Well, because things back then used to be like, hey, here's one book or two books. Now it's, hey, here's book 1 of 9.
Yeah, that's a tough sell, right?
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, you're 7. I intentionally didn't go to 7 on purpose.
Yeah, 9 is definitely too many. I'm just going to put that out there.
Breaking news, guys. He's not expanding the series to 9. Maybe 8, though. 8's not off the table.
Unless Dave makes me add more stuff and then split my book in half, like my previous editor.
Not inconceivable. Look, it used to be easier to discover other stuff because sci-fi and fantasy was in one place in the bookstore, and and B, there weren't algorithms forcing you into narrow and narrower categories, right? The same algorithms that on social media say, oh, you're going to like this person and this person because you're like them. You're going to like these tweets because this person is saying things like you do, that put us all into our own customized echo chamber. The same algorithms are trying to suggest books at Amazon, right? Which may be a great way to sell books, but it's not a great way to expand the literary tastes of your clientele, right? It's actually narrowing what the platform wants you to read.
I found like one thing interesting. Like I've read a few biographies now of like authors. Like I read Terry Pratchett's autobiography, and like he like really like he started out his like writing journey as like a sci-fi author. Like his first few books were sci-fi, and like his love for fantasy came through like a sci-fi medium. And like he was, you know, as a young child, like reading tons of like sci-fi novels and then joining like sci-fi clubs and book clubs to write his stories. And it's kind of interesting how, you know, you can have an author who is really seen as like a mainstream like staple of the fantasy genre, but is like he had his roots in sci-fi. And I think that's kind of interesting how like maybe like sci-fi is almost kind of, it can be very formative in an author's like journey to becoming like the way they write or the way they because I think there's a few authors like that who started in sci-fi, or that was their real interest, and then they branched into fantasy. And I think that's maybe an interesting discussion, I thought, too. Or that just kind of made me think of it when I read his biography. But yeah, that was pretty interesting though.
Yeah. What do you think about Jared's statement here that he doesn't think there's a real difference between science fiction and fantasy? They are just useful to help people with different tastes rather than pick out essential differences.
Jared's smarter than me, so I'm gonna say yeah, sure, he's right.
Jared's disagreeing with me, so he's manifestly wrong.
Oh,
Got him.
okay. Well, DJ's smarter than me too, so he's right. So
Bam.
Bam. Nothing is real. Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's probably a way to sort of, you know, synthesize what Dave was saying earlier with this, right? I think that on a certain level, and with what Mike was saying earlier too, I do think a lot of the sort of genre, you know, division, and especially like the new like accelerated like micro stuff. There's like a new genre every minute, right? Is purely like a marketing thing, and it's all about sort of pigeonholing reader tastes and like pushing, you know, product so that they can consume product and get excited for next product, right? And you know, buy.
okay,
I
John
think
Carpenter, god dang, calm down.
I think I love that meme.
They Live.
But,
Great movie, guys. Watch it.
But yes, oh man, so good. They're remaking it apparently. Did you see that?
Of course they are. They
Yeah,
remade The Thing. Nothing's sacred to these efforts. Gosh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I just don't get it. There's nothing more to say. The movie was complete. But you know, but I
money to be had.
well, of course,
railing again. God dang it.
yeah. No, look, that's the thing in the game, man. We knew it was gonna happen. But like, I don't know. I think that in a certain sense, right, that they're both doing the same thing to the extent that they're like speculating, right? But I think you have to like go up a frame, right, to say that they're the same thing, because a lot of the stuff that science fiction is speculating about is like completely made up, right? Vulcans are as made up as elves, right, and are not that different in certain ways, right? And so they, you know, the two genres are doing the same thing, you know, to a certain extent. But I think the approaches for how you go about things, like, you know, my favorite subject, Dave, world building, you know, and handling themes and stuff like that as a writer is maybe where like Dave's whole right brain, left brain thing comes in. You know, because obviously there are people who, you know, enjoy both the sort of literature of ideas, right, in terms of like the archetypal religious stuff, and you know, the, I guess, literature of ideas in terms of like, you know, how does science do, right? What the future could be. I think one of the big differences between these sort of, you know, two ways of writing is that like there's like, I think fantasy, you know, at least broadly speaking, is romantic in the sense that it is like looking back at humanity's past or dredging up aspects of it, right? You know, knights, castles, whatever, in some way. And most science fiction is sort of forward facing and isn't looking at stuff like that at all. In fact, I think a lot of science fiction writers hate a lot of that stuff. Like they like the past is bad, right? The future needs to be better, you know, like Gene Roddenberry sort of way of thinking. And I think that's a big thing that separates them. But I do think fundamentally, you know, on a like really high level, they're both speculating about, you know, the world and humanity's relationship to it.
It's hard to write. It's hard to write like science essentially, right, and make it sound believable and like logical. Whereas magic, you can kind of make it up a little bit more and have a little bit more wishy-washy kind of stuff in it. Whereas like science, like if it doesn't sound or feel believable, you're like, oh, that sound, I don't believe it, right? I'm not gonna buy that one. Kind of like.
You
All
think
right,
it's maybe
I got one for you, Christopher. Why is
Yeah.
it seem like to me that like with a lot of more so at least that what I've read, a lot more science fiction seems to be, hey, you don't understand what's going on? That's okay. Don't worry about it. But whereas fantasy, it seems like it's usually pretty forward about what's going on. Whereas, you know, science fiction will be like, we don't know. You know, I mean, I haven't read Gene Wolfe yet, but I hear everyone who reads Gene Wolfe says this. Hey, don't worry about it. You don't understand it. Nobody understands it. I don't
Yeah.
feel like that
Well,
happens.
well, Gene is special, right? But like, I wonder if maybe like with like, oh, if you don't understand how my spaceship works, like that's fine. I think is I mean, I think that's because, right, a lot of the writers just like they've like done their homework and they know it works, right? You know, or they think they know it works, or it, you know, it works from their point of view. You know, and maybe I think it's because of the difficulty thing. I think it's like, oh, you don't understand quantum mechanics, and you're not going to understand quantum mechanics. So, you know, unless you're like that reader, right? So, the fact that I am sort of, you just trust me, I got you, bro. I think is where that attitude comes.
So
from.
you're not like Michael Crichton putting his sources and references in the
Yeah,
back.
right.
and-
You ever got your sources listed at the back of your book? Are you
Where's your,
Yeah.
lying, bro?
Like-
where's your auto like your references are works cited, Christopher?
Oh,
Yeah. I mean, I should actually do that so people will just shut up on Goodreads.
Are you just going to put Frank Herbert and Dan Simmons, and that's it? That's just going to say just read the
right.
book?
That's the whole list. Yeah. Yeah. I should go through and put like footnotes in just so that I'm like this, in case you didn't get it the first time. This was an allusion to another work of literature. That's a thing that you can do. Do you remember 10th grade English class? You remember
So
allusions?
You're just gonna
children?
write Discworld then, Christopher, because that's all full of footnotes, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I'll put a footnote on the footnote that's like Terry Pratchett invented the footnote, apparently, right? Just like Frank Herbert invented the force field.
Don't forget that Patrick Rothfuss created like the frame narrative story. You know, telling the life story.
The
I mean,
original,
it
the
never
original
happened
frame
before him.
narrative was written by Patrick Rothfuss in 323 BC.
And never written again.
Right.
Right.
When
When he started writing it, because it
when he-
feels like it.
Man, I realized, this is another tangent. I realized yesterday that I was in 8th grade when Name of the Wind came out.
I was older.
Yeah, but it's been a minute. I have a kid. It's been a minute.
Hey, my kid, I didn't have any kids when the last Song of Ice and Fire book came out. Now I've got a junior high student and a kid in 4th grade now. So yeah, there we go.
Yeah, that was what, 2011?
God, it's been a while. Yeah.
Yeah, I was in 12th grade.
Can't talk about one without talking about. You talk about Rothfuss, Martin's going to come up.
Yeah.
Talk about
Right.
Rothfuss.
Yes.
Scott Lynch continues to skate on by.
Good for him.
Good for him. He has evaded that. He has evaded that conversation.
Yeah.
Hey, Dan, I have a question for you. Liam wants to know if you actually make videos.
Look at this guy.
I saw the opportunity.
Yeah, no, it's been a while. Yeah, it's been a hot minute. Just been so busy with life and and work. Work sucks, but I love my job. But I mean, it just monopolizes time. That get home and like I could sleep or I could read this book. I think I'm gonna choose sleep right now.
Irish Knight has a good comment down there. A good question for you, Christopher. I think.
Oh, where's that?
About Roman history.
The question is, how often do I think about the Roman Empire? That question presupposes that I ever stop. Oh man, the chat goes much further.
Is it why are all best authors obsessed with Roman history? Pierce Brown, Miss Ruocchio, Jay Kristoff, just to name a few.
Yeah, well, Irish Knight, that would be because Rome is fascinating. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I Rome is you know, in a lot of ways, the like cornerstone of Western civilization, right? That's not to say that like the Greeks didn't predate it or that there aren't other components, but it is in Rome, right, that like all of the pre-existing components are sort of synthesized.
So are you saying
right?
that the Romans were the Tolkien of the real world and that like they didn't create this stuff, they just did it the best?
They just did it the best.
Yeah,
Yes.
just did it better.
Yeah, exactly, right? No, but like it's like in Rome, right, that like all of the elements of sort of modern Western civilization are sort of pulled together and sort of given their basic shape, right? You know, you've got you've got obviously you know, sort of the Greek, you know, tradition comes in there, right? All like Roman law, you know, in a lot of ways like provides the sort of substructure for you know, Catholic canon law, right? You know, which is sort of instrumental in forming a lot of medieval law codes and stuff like that. And Christianity itself, you know, sort of it gets brought in right through Rome and sort of spread out everywhere.
It's
And
even our language, right? Like half of English is like half Germanic and Latin, right? Like it's a cornerstone of like civilization, essentially. Like especially like Rome. Like Rome's my jam, right? Like because it went through so many stages, right? Went from like monarchy to republic to empire again, right? Like it's just it has all these things in it that is a great story.
yeah, but see, Liam, here's the thing, right? It is in English, right, that we add that extra step and we complete the synthesis, right? English is the heir to both the Roman world and the Germanic world, which makes English the best language. I'm completely with you.
Or arguably not a language at all, but a pigeon.
Right.
Yeah,
English
that's
is
fair.
English is 3 languages, you know, in a trench coat, you know. Yeah, it's you know.
It's like, well, English is so descriptive, right? It has twice as many words as the language that has second number of words in it, right? So it's unbelievably descriptive. But yeah, it makes sense. Like that's why maybe yours is so successful, Christopher, your story, because it's like the Roman Empire essentially reborn in space.
Yes, as a LARP. Yeah. That was my favorite review anybody ever wrote was about how obviously the world building was explicitly a LARP, and they forgot about that along the way, which was like, yes, this guy gets it. That is completely true. But I lost something Jared said. He was talking about how, where did it go?
He's waiting for your Byzantine phase.
The Byzantines.
Who?
Byzantine.
You know, my brother called me once, and he was mad because he knew his professor had said something wrong. She had said that Christianity killed the Roman Empire, which is this old stupid talking point from like the 18th century. And she's like, I know that's wrong, but I don't know why. I'm like, ask her if Christianity killed the Roman Empire. Why was there still the Roman Empire?
Yeah, for like another 1,000 years.
Yeah, no, shut up, professor, whatever. Like, you're wrong. Get out of here.
Get out.
But surely one of the reasons why people are still interested today in the Roman Empire is because simply of what has survived, right? Like it's so much easier to get into and read Latin books than Germanic, right? I don't like how many. How hard is it to get a hold of Gothic grammar? And you know, I think the only written document in Gothic is a translation of the Bible, isn't it? So really, it's Old English before you really get to complete languages and literatures. It's just much more. Now, maybe it's because people valued it, so they held on to it. They associated it with empire and aqueducts and roads.
Well, Latin was the language of the common people because like all the scholarly text in ancient Rome was written in ancient Greek. So I think that's maybe why, because it was so widespread, right? Like Latin was so widespread.
Yeah, a vulgar Latin, right? The
Yeah.
Latin that turned into Spanish and Catalan and
Romanian
Occitan
and
whatever,
yeah, exactly.
Right? All of the 1,000 little dialects.
No, it's true. Yeah, and it was everywhere, and it's easy to write. It's like a lot less characters, and it's also logical. It's very logical. Like the verb's always usually at the end of the sentence. You can tell like how a sentence is structured based on the cases. It's like, yeah, it's like a super logical language, and it fits with the Roman Empire like perfectly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's so popular for like fiction writers because it's cool, right? I think that's the simple answer, right? And I think everybody knows what it is, right? If you come out and you say, hey, I'm writing a fantasy novel or science fiction novel that's based on like the Mitanni Empire, I would be very excited. And people are like, who? Like, what are you talking about? And then it's not, you're not going to sell as many copies.
It's like, imagine if like the spells in Harry Potter weren't like Pig Latin, right? Imagine like how unpopular it would have been if it was just like random other words, right?
Right. It was all in Elamite.
How about this
Let me tell
unpopular
you-
opinion, Christopher? How about it's so popular because it teaches us a life lesson that you're never too big to fail?
I guess there's that too.
I
In
mean,
fact,
yeah.
the bigger you get,
The bigger you get, the easier it is to fail. Yeah.
the easier it is to fail.
Yeah.
Mitanni actually is an especially interesting kingdom of the ancient world. Actually,
Yeah, they're really cool.
they are really cool.
They're like
among
Bronze
them-
Age Rohirrim.
That's right, and in fact, their royal names include elements that indicate that at least the royal class spoke Old Indic. They knew the gods of the Vedas, and
Oh,
the
wow.
technical vocabulary for horses and chariots are Indian words. And Mitanni, for those, is in Syria, right? Mitanni is in Syria, so this is like 1500 BC. You got a class of Rohirrim that rode apparently from like the Punjab over into Syria, took a kingdom and then held it for a few hundred years, which is actually super fascinating.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have picked like a Near Eastern example because I knew Dave was just gonna know like everything about them off top of his head. But I could have picked anyone. Dave would have,
But
Dave,
what
quick,
about-
do the Olmecs, Dave.
The Olmecs.
Gigantic heads in Veracruz in Mexico. Gigantic stone heads. The Olmecs are fascinating.
Yeah, they're pretty cool. But I think I think the Roman thing is just because like everybody's sort of familiar with it, right? And everybody thinks it's neat. You've got like it is aesthetically cool, right? Like all the columns and the arches and the gladiators and the armor is cool, right? You've got chariot races, you've got like togas, like everybody's wearing
even if
these hats, right?
Even if you think of space too, Christopher, like all of our planets in our solar system are mostly named after like Roman gods too, right?
Yeah. I think there's there's obviously like we've set up this sort of classical association with outer space too. So like, maybe that's a part of it. I certainly like kept that theme going. Like I have this gigantic, vector map of the Roman Empire. I could zoom into like village sites. So I got like all the names right there, right? So I just scroll around. I'm like, this one, that's the planet name. But,
Irish Knight asked an interesting question. Like, did Romans believe in Greek gods? No, technically they were their own gods, but they were like, they borrowed, right?
yeah. Well, what happened, right, is like the Greeks and the Romans have like a common ancestor and their gods sort of diverged from
That's right.
there. Right. And then when they got back into contact, there was a lot of cultural cross-pollination from the Greeks into the Roman. We don't have a very clear picture of what like pre-Hellenized Italian religion looked like. But like, for example, the like Roman gods were not usually depicted in human form, like prior to the like sort of the Greek invasion, as it were, culturally. There's some exceptions, but like they were mostly not depicted at all.
But like by the Republic, every god had like so many different like names, like like because they'd be like Zeus of like the canals, or like Persephone of like like every like hill had a god in Rome, right? And gods had different like many different forms, right? And at
yeah,
that
well,
stage-
the Greeks had that too, right? They had demons, right? Or daimons.
Yeah.
So like Kratos, of video game fame, but like no, I mean there were like wood nymphs and things and stuff, so they all had those. But no, the Romans didn't. The Romans didn't Christianize until the 4th century.
Yeah, it was a while.
No. We got off. That was a fun
A
tangent.
long Roman tangent there.
It's it's pretty
Ancient
normal.
dialects aren't going to get a big opinion out of me, guys. I don't really have any hot takes on this. I just trust the bigger brains in the room on this one.
Yeah, but
I know
Roman,
Big Latin. Does that count?
yes, that is
I
a
know about
legitimate
500
dialect.
words in Spanish. So here we go.
This is more than me.
Yeah,
But
more than me.
yeah, no, I think the cool thing is like the thing, right? Because like you just you want the books to be cool, or like nobody's going to read them. Like this is something I think some writers forget about.
Hey, you know what? It's very, very Roman inspired. Red Rising saga. Oh, but you knew that, didn't you?
That is true. It is me, Pierce Brown.
Yeah, but then Pierce Brown calls them Jupiterians. So,
that's not my favorite choice. The word
Well,
Jovian
Treebeard's
exists.
famously a Red Rising hater. That's why we don't talk.
I saw that
hate it.
comment. I thought I would bring it in just to like.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
I don't
There's lots
hate
of
it, I
stuff.
just
I'm
don't
sure there's
like it.
theories that Treebeard loves that I don't. It's perfectly normal. I don't get mad about stuff like that. I never have.
It's just a book, right? I mean, it's okay. Like, he lost me in the second one though, and I know everyone says the second one's good, but he broke me in that one where I couldn't finish it.
No, I mean you sound broken, so it's fine. No, it's fine. I got the same thing with the Star Wars books. I mean, Christopher, you read for a long time as well. You read into the New Jedi Order, didn't you?
Yeah.
And I mean, I got all my friends like bailing on it because I read Star Wars to have fun. And I'm just like, well, you know what? I'm not 6 anymore. And I like that these characters are growing as I grow. So I do. Some people are for that. Some people are against that. So, Red Rising is just a little too dark for everybody. I get that. It's not too dark.
Some people like their Star Wars characters to regress and become worse than they were when we first met them.
Yeah, that's
true.
what Disney thinks.
Yeah. Like, oh boy.
Kathleen Kennedy, for example.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Are you still watching that stuff, Christopher? Are you still?
Only
I bet you're
because-
watching Ahsoka, aren't you?
Only because so I did not watch Mandalorian season 3, and I have zero plans to do so.
Don't.
Yeah, I just it looked terrible, and then it
this
started
is
to
season
sound
3.
even worse. I am watching Ahsoka because I love Ray Stevenson, and I wanted to give it a shot. And I have a baby,
and you're a glutton for punishment.
That's true. I will say this: it is better than the Mandalorian, which I always thought was pretty but it's not great. But it's it's on.
Scott's been giving me like spoiler reviews, and I'm just LOLing. I'm so glad that I'm not doing it anymore. So.
Yeah, it's like if they'd done another script revision, it could have been good, but they didn't. So it's like only okay.
It's like everything Disney touches, though. They should have had a script revision.
Yeah,
or a script.
This is like or a script.
Good
This
point.
is a common like modern problem though. Is like I just think there are like too many people writing for like all
Too
of
many
them
cooks in the
possibly
kitchen?
good. Yeah.
Mm.
Oh no, just like I just think
In the
that
world.
like they're just the demand for writers exceeds civilization's supply. Like there's just like we have to make so
This
many
problem
shows
is
they
about to
can't
get a
all.
lot worse.
Yeah.
Right? Look, I'll tell you, I've been on several panels this year where people have been very excited to do AI assisted writing, and the future belongs to those who use AI, chatbot algorithms to decouple their output, right? And as you say, we already have a lot. So.
Yeah. There's a bit in there's like a throwaway detail in Neil Stephenson's Anthem, right, where there's like this class of people whose job it is to like sort through everything on the internet because so much of it is completely worthless that to get to the real data you have to like have a priest class who are like considered unclean, right, because they have to sort through the internet to find all of the garbage, to find the good stuff and all the garbage. And like we were already there, but like it's about to get so much worse, right? It's just like how many we're literally like maybe 10 years away from the library in that Borges story where most of the books are just incomprehensible gibberish. Like it's just there's just so much shit, and there's going to be so much more shit.
What's the quote? Real stupidity beats artificial intelligence every day.
Well, I said during the writer's strike, I kind of got grilled for this one, but I said, can AI actually be worse than what's writing Rings of Power? I mean, can it really be worse?
No,
True, that was a hot mess.
I mean, you could have told me it was written by an AI, and I'd have believed you. The dialogue sounded like it went through a Tolkien, like where you just put in your words and it does it into like Tolkien dialect. That's what it sounded like when we were watching it. My wife said, it sounds like it's just like one of those auto generators things, of Tolkien dialect. It just made no sense. So could it be worse?
Not much.
So that's why I
so,
wasn't one of those
yeah.
people who's like, I support the writers. I'm like, look, I want people to get paid. I do. I want them to get paid. Get your money. You know, you don't do anything for free, right? If you're good at it, that's what Joker taught us, right? But it's just, it could have been worse. I mean, it's like in 2007, yeah, I was all for it because, you know, there was still really, really great stuff on. I wanted my Battlestar Galactica back, damn it. You know, I didn't have a Battlestar Galactica this time. I didn't have that show this time where I was like, that's the smartest thing I've seen on TV in a while. Now it's just like, there's just this rush for content now. And it's just like, who cares if it's written well? Let's just get it out. We got dates. We got deadlines to meet. So,
yeah. The unfortunate part of this story that like no one ever talks about, right, is that it works, right? People watch it, people read it.
Yeah. They wouldn't keep doing it if they didn't make money on it, right?
They watch it, they read it, they tweet about it and post in social media and give their public personas over to the marketing machine of Disney.
And then you have people like Christopher who don't even like it. Keep watching it. It's your fault.
Yes, well, yeah, I am part of the problem, right? This is the one thing that I haven't watched though, and like I have mostly been watching Batman the Animated Series again because things don't have to be terrible. And if I'm going to pay for these streaming services, at least that one's included with my internet. You know, I may as well watch stuff that's not terrible. So, yeah, and it has like one bad episode.
So good too. Animated series. I was watching it with my kids when it came out on Blu-ray. That's aged so damn well.
It's there was only one episode I thought was terrible, and like all the other ones were at least good.
You guys remember the show Gargoyles?
Yes. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, well, I started watching that with my son. That was on Disney Plus. I was like, "This is," and he's like, it blew the back of his head right off. He's like, "This show is amazing, Dad. This is better than Bluey." Like,
that's a bit of an upgrade, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, my kid's watching One Piece right now. I'm just like, I'm enjoying reading it, but I was like, oh God, it's so loud. Make it stop. Why are they yelling like all the time? When I'm reading it, they're not yelling like this.
That's that shonen sound mixing. Yeah.
Sir Galahad asked an interesting question. It's scrolled up a bit now, but he asked, I think back on the sort of our original topic. He asked, is all science fiction, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm not looking at, is all science fiction intrinsically either utopian or dystopian? Does the adoption of science fiction as your genre sort of tend to force you to choose one of those? And Christopher, would you say that the Sun Eater is, well, A, is it science fiction, but B, is it dystopian or utopian?
Well, you know, in order to answer the question, sure, it's science fiction, right? Because I could just say no and then like not address it, right? Yeah, but like no, I don't think it's I don't think that's true, right? I think that there is a tendency on the part of some writers to you know, use science fiction. Like a lot of writers, like actually science fiction is about today, right? It's not about, you know, it's not about the future. It's not about an adventure. It's not about,
hey, Will Wheaton,
you know, whatever, right? It's about today, right? And I think those people just really would be better off with blogs. You know, like if they could just please stop trying to entertain people and just do what they actually want to do. That's
great. Will Wheaton say that before Star Trek Picard season 3, and I was like, "Get this guy out! Shut up, Wesley!"
No, it's shut up, Wesley is right. Like obviously, like there's, you know, this is the old Tolkien point about applicability, right? Like sure, like your, you know, science fiction story should have like, you know, applicability to, you know, what's going on today. People be like, oh, this is just like, you know, this is just like Harry Potter, right? Sure, like that's fine, but like fundamentally you need to be you know, engaging people's, you know, imagination and entertaining them. If you're not entertaining them, then, you know, you have failed, right? And you should not collect $200. But I think as a consequence of the fact that it'd be better off writing blogs, I think the tendency of a lot of writers is to like, I'm going to write a utopian story in which all of my ideas, imagine that, are correct, and all of everybody else's ideas are stupid and bad. Like those are writers that I don't have a lot of patience for. I think the Sun Eater is basically just utopia, in the sense that it's, you know, it is a future. Some stuff is not good. You know, some places are better than others. But I don't think like any single philosophy like actually works, right? At least in terms of like politics or something like that. I think you know, so
One of the
Maybe
things I
some
like
work better
about-
than others, but
One of the things I like about Ian Banks's culture novels is the culture is clearly a sort of leftist fantasy, right? And it is sort of a utopia on its terms. People live forever. They can swap their sex back and forth with surgery. AIs do magical, self-aware AIs do all the work. This is a utopia within the culture taken on its own terms. But I think Ian Banks was sensitive enough or aware enough to realize that not everybody would like even the utopia he imagined, right? So like there is the culture, but even though some people would clearly love it or think they would love it, actually it still has enemies. There are people who don't want
One man's utopia is another's dystopia.
what the author
Yeah.
presents as a utopia, right? So that's a very interesting kind of nuanced position.
yeah, this is actually I've said the same thing. This is the thing I like about Banks so much is exactly this, right? And his protagonists are usually people who don't fit in, right? Consider Phlebas actually the main character is hostile to the culture in the first place, right? He is
Yeah.
from outside of it. He hates them, and so he's usually taking like a sledgehammer to his own beliefs and sort of is trying to see what holds up. Yeah, no, I'm with you, Jared. I would hate to live there. Like, I don't want to. The culture is fundamentally a human zoo, right? And it's I wouldn't like nothing you do actually has meaning, unless you go be a like CIA agent and mess with less developed civilizations, which like I also am not 100% sure is something that I want to, would want to do. But yeah, I don't know that science fiction is intrinsically utopian or dystopian. I think that you can make calls about what the future might be like, or might be like is pretentious, right? Like could be like, right? Because science fiction writers are like almost always wrong about everything,
yeah.
actually, right? Like I missed the part one where there are pyramids in LA right now, and two when it became cool to like grow human beings and like sell them for as slaves again. Now unofficially, like sure, like human trafficking is a thing, but like officially, like you can't just grow replicants and sell them. Like that was a bad call. 2019 was not like that. And we don't use flip phones anymore either, right? So like, science
Sure.
fiction writers not the best track record being right, but you can like pick
But
a
the Matrix
future.
was an astonishingly good metaphor for social media,
Sure.
right?
Dude, go back and read Ender's Game and tell me like shit posting wasn't predicted decades ago, and now the people couldn't make a career out of that. I mean, he flat out told us in that book.
Yeah.
We do it for artificial girlfriends. That's a funny comment.
But I think you're right, Christopher. The individual predictions have an abysmally low percentage chance of ever being right. So
Yeah.
it's interesting. Like maybe this is why we need to have lots of science fiction, is because it's in the aggregate that we get valuable predictions, not from one writer putting out her vision.
Yeah, no individual writer has like really been like on the money about anything. There's been a lot of like, oh, like maybe they got this thing kind of right if you squint and turn your head sideways, but
Well,
yeah,
like
no,
Philip K. Dick, right? Philip K. Dick died, having missed the zeitgeist of his time, but he got the zeitgeist of our time, right? Because Dick stories and Dick movies are always about what is real, what can I trust, right? What is just false and an illusion, right?
True.
So I mean, and the result is financially tragic for Philip K. Dick, because he basically was a couch surfer his whole life, right? They made a movie, Blade Runner, right before he died, but then Man in the High Castle, Total Recall twice, Minority Report, right? All these come out after he's dead because his stories rang really true the generation after.
They haven't adapted Ubik, have they?
I don't believe so.
That one
No.
would be crazy though if they did. That one.
They've done a bunch of his short stories though. Like Imposter, there was a movie that's a pretty good one actually.
Scanners, right? Shoot, I'm forgetting the title.
Christopher, who's the guy who wrote "I have to scream"? I have no mouth, but I have to scream. Or,
Harlan Ellison.
yeah, I would like to see that because I think that would melt people's brains.
You could do that on a pretty low budget too. Actually,
yeah, I think so. That's a good read, and you can read that with a cup of over a cup of coffee. I mean, it's really short, but
yeah, well, it's like barely a novella, right? It's
like 40 pages if that.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're just getting into like, hey, stuff I'd like to see adapted because I think it would, make more sense now. But then again, they're not very. The track record of adaptation right now is not very good. So I'm just gonna stop saying.
Yeah.
Scanner Darkly, Liam. That's the one I'm thinking of. Yeah.
Scanner Darkly. Oh yeah, that cell shaded movie. Yeah, but that.
Yeah. That was like RDJ was in that like right after the drugs, right? Like pretty recently after that.
I think Keanu was in it too, wasn't he?
Yeah, totally.
Whoa.
Jared says, except Card thought posting long blogs about political philosophy could change the world. In reality, Valentine would have been harassed off the internet and Peter would get really into it.
Probably true. I just say that, people thought that was like the unrealistic part of that book. And I'm like, really? Okay.
I don't know. Like maybe in another generation, everybody in Congress will just be a YouTuber. So like,
not that far off. You've seen. Never mind. I'm not going to take that one there. Never mind.
Yeah.
I'm glad I stopped myself there.
Just give it time. Things will become unfathomably worse. That's. I have this thought frequently that like, oh, soon my parents' music won't be what I hear in public places. It will just get worse.
Chris, wait a few more years. You're going to turn into your parents. You're going to think everything on the radio is crap. You're going to like watching a music award show, and you're going to turn into your parents and be like, "This is terrible. This is awful. How can you call that music?" It's going to happen. It's going to happen.
Oh, I've been that person since I was like 8.
It's going to get worse. Trust me. Like to the point, like used to be like, "Oh, I like this one, but I don't like that one." Now it's like, "This is terrible. Turn it off." Yeah, it happened to me a couple years back, and I just like, "Oh my god, it finally happened."
Yeah, that happens to us all.
And you're making fun of like the band names and stuff. Like I remember my mom like just tossing her cookies because it was a band called Stone Temple Pilots and Smashing Pumpkins, and she just thought that was just like, I was like, really, this bothers you that much? Now I hear some of this shit, I'm like, oh my god, I guess it really does happen to all of us, doesn't it?
Yeah,
comes full circle.
Entropy is real. Yeah, it's a law of physics. Things have to get worse. So
but there's a solution. Look, the solution is you got to be proactively involved in your kids' musical choices. I tell you what, my second child, my older daughter, is in her freshman year at university, and every couple of weeks I mail her CDs. So she just got Bob Marley from me this week, and I forget what she's got coming next week. I think it's Elliott Smith and might be Nick Drake or something. So, but I got my kids into Talking Heads and the Smiths and all kinds of great stuff.
Yeah, my kids like Led Zeppelin, so I'm doing all right.
Yeah, do it. That's so when they leave home, send them with a collection.
Oh yeah,
that's a good idea.
Take CDs with you.
He asked me all the time, like, "Hey, when you die, who gets your books?" Like, well, you're getting my music collection first because you got to learn, because I've heard that video game music you've been listening to lately, So.
Every now and then,
go ahead, Christopher.
I was to say every now and then, video game music isn't bad.
No, that's true.
Oh no, I don't mean like actually. I mean like it just sounds like old MIDI file music. It's just sounding stuff.
Yeah, that would not be good.
Actually, my youngest likes Imagine Dragons, so he's got a ways to go too.
Yeah, that's a choice.
I mean, it's written for 8-year-olds, so it works out perfectly.
Yeah, it's like Nickelback, right?
Yeah. No, Jared says his 4-month-old's only heard Bob Dylan, classical composers and the Replacements. Mine is really taken a shine to Queen, and is already a realer Queen fan than most Queen fans because her favorite song is Dragon Attack. As far as I can tell, that's the one that she reacts the most.
Deep cut. All right.
Yeah. So
one of my patrons just said in the private chat, so it's giving some access here. Said DJ Butler with the Smiths. That makes sense. LOL. I don't know if that's a personal attack or not. Hey, I like How Soon Is Now.
Might be.
Yeah.
Will we be getting another Witchy Eye book?
Yeah, the answer is yes. You'll get 2 more, and that will finish the series. And I've just been sidetracked by some other writing projects and by some surprising day job kind of life projects, but they are coming. I love that series. There's no mystery to me where it goes. I'm not sitting around stumped because I have written myself into a corner as a pantser. It's coming. But thank you, Nick. That's very kind.
Yeah. Is Witchy 5 your next thing?
It should be soon. I hope it's the beginning of next year. I got to finish my share of The Familiar Spirit, which is the third Hiram Woolley novel. I have outlined the sequel to Time Trials. I have a nonfiction book I am contracted to write, which is The Politically Incorrect Guide to Science Fiction and Fantasy. And then I should write Serpent Mother and Serpent Son. I want to write them back to back and finish them.
Knock it out. I also, of course,
Christopher, I thought this was who you were having on tonight. I had no idea that they weren't the same person.
Oh, that's like you have to like squint. Yeah, be like
R.J. Barker, DJ Butler. It's like, wait, which one's which? Okay, all right.
It's tricky. It's tricky.
Yeah, I don't know Barker. Dave knows me too well at this point. I'm bothering.
Yeah.
Oh, was he going? Is he going to tell me to read Tim Powers too?
Yeah, actually,
you
yes.
should read Tim Powers.
Who do you think told me?
I got Anubis Gates finally, so
okay, that's good. You might.
Is that the one you said that it ripped off, Chris?
Yes, there's a character in Anubis Gates that may have inspired Pennywise. Yes, it predates it. The Anubis Gates predates it, and Stephen King is on the record as having read Tim Powers.
Okay.
So. Yeah, and look, if
right,
you like
Stephen,
Stephen,
said R.J. Barker, K.J. Parker, D.J. Butler. Yeah, I'm like, oh my god, guys, use your first name, please.
Yeah.
So The Anubis Gates is great. Arguably one of the seminal steampunk novels. But man, there's so many other ones. If horror is your jam, I really love The Stress of Her Regard, which is a novel about fighting a tribe of vampires who live up in the Alps who inspire poets while slowly killing them. And the protagonist is Lord Byron. So you got like Byron traveling around Italy and plotting with the Carbonari to kill a vampire and hiding there, and who's like one of the founding members of the Habsburg family. Oh, okay. Powers is great. His most recent one is called My Brother's Keeper, and it's a story about vampires and one-eyed vampire hunters and family curses and the ruined temple to the goddess Minerva, and the protagonist is Emily Bronte.
So you can't accuse him of being unoriginal, huh?
He is very original. He's very smart, and he really likes to play with. Actually, there's an interview. I interviewed him. It might be coming out this weekend about My Brother's Keeper, and like the number of details in there that are actually historical, like corroborated details, is over the top. He does not deviate from the published historical record. Just in the cracks goes and finds the werewolves and the vampires and the UFOs and etc.
I just teach Christopher that he's his personal hype man, because basically me recommending a Stephen King book is him recommending I read Tim Powers at least. So
yeah,
I keep trying. This has been like
I bought Anubis Gates because of you. So
yeah.
They got
Dave's right
Stranger
though.
Tides too is good.
Oh, on Stranger Tides rules. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, this is how most people know his work, right? Is that Disney, or I don't know the full story, I think was sort of originally ripping him off, and then Tim lawyered up and said, "Hey, you're turning my novel into a Pirates of the Caribbean movie," and so they had, paid him and used the title. I think unofficial. I think that's what happened. But yeah, the one about the Blackbeard and the Fountain of Youth was a Tim Powers novel.
Yeah, Jack Shandy.
Yeah,
no kidding.
Yeah,
yeah, it's super good. If you ever want to read a pirate book, yeah. No, I keep trying. Stress. I keep, is the one I think I keep mentioning to you every October. I was due to bother you about it, Mike. You should really read that vampire book. If you run out of horror books, which I know is impossible, but I'm just saying.
I don't know. I started doing my Halloween reads, and the first one was kind of a dud. So now I'm kind of demotivated. So hoping the next one goes good.
Man, take it up. It's really good.
I'll send you a link.
Well, yeah, he's your boy. Just tell him to send me the book.
That's true. That's true. We should just be like, hey, Tim, make it happen. He's so good though.
Gene Wolfe died. Tim Powers is the greatest living fantasy writer. Watch out.
Yeah, he's. I mean, I go back and forth between Tim and Guy K, who I'm a big fan of. They're sort of my top two. So,
Hey,
but
I heard
like,
he helped finish the Silmarillion.
yes,
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
He
To say before I started this channel, that's all I knew about GGK was that he helped finish the Silmarillion. I had no idea that he was this loved and respected. So,
And he's Canadian too.
He is Canadian.
we aren't going to hold that against him.
Yeah.
So was Brian Adams. It's fine. So was Rush.
Happens every now and then. Every now and then you run into a Canadian. Sometimes they're even in the chat room with you. So.
In the sunlight and everything. No,
yeah.
Like a vampire.
Well, it's artificial up there. The sun doesn't reach so far into that shadowy place.
It never sets.
But actually, yeah, it never sets. Sorry, I was getting it backwards. Yeah, and actually, Tim's a really good segue back to like the actual topic, right? Because we're talking about how like early on. The genres weren't really like that differentiated, right? And Tim really kind of writes in that vein, right? There's magic in his stories, but like if you squint, there's a lot of like scientific sort of undercurrent to how that stuff operates, right? And he's doing the quantum handwave thing a little bit, but there's a bit in I forget which book, right, where like these bullets are like coming through windows, and they're like two windows next to each other, and because of the magic going on, the bullets scatter, and it's sort of like the double slit experiment, right, where they're like striking the back wall in like a wave pattern instead of hitting the people in the windows. And it's like, oh, that's a little quantum effect, right? But it's it's a magic book, right? It's I think that might be stress actually. I might be in stress for her regard. But like he like very much is writing in this like earlier tradition where like the things aren't so split up, and so for that matter is like Stephen King, right? Stephen King stuff like will sort of not really discriminate between genres the way that a lot of other writers do, right? Like Dark Tower is a fantasy, but it's like also a Western, and there's like
horror, yeah.
like there's horror, right? There's science fiction elements, and so I really kind of strongly believe like like Jared's saying, like this is kind of one genre, right? If only because that's kind of how people treated it at the beginning, but it also, right, like is like what we call genres are really like kind of like paint colors that writers can play with, right? It's like, oh, I'm gonna just toss in a little bit of that gothic horror there just to bother Mike, and and I'll put some cyberpunk on the side, and you go all Bob Ross with it, right? I don't know that like fundamentally makes I don't know that including cyberpunk makes a book fundamentally a different genre or something. I think these are more like tools than they are like fundamentally altering the nature of the story. I think really what's that?
So there is a place in the bookstore where that can still happen. And that's in if you go to middle grade or you go to young adult literature, right? There isn't nearly as much concern over what genre is this. Is it science fiction? Is it fantasy? Is it mystery? Can it be science fiction and mystery? Can it be fantasy and mystery? Yeah, because the genre is ignores all of that. It's just middle grade. It's just books for people who are 12 or under, right? Which makes me kind of wonder how much of the divisions of genres is really booksellers' problems imposing themselves on writers, right? Because it's the bookseller who has to say, this is science fiction versus this is fantasy, to explain to a reader what's inside it, whether they would like to write. And even like the proliferation of microgenres we get on Amazon, right? Where, my book was #1 in steampunk post-apocalyptic Authorial, right? And I mean, yay! I got the orange the orange banner.
It's like when Netflix has their titles listed as like raunchy teen fantasy with dark humor in a sci-fi setting. It's like, what the fuck?
Yeah. I didn't sign up for that. Yeah.
Right. And maybe we've come full circle here again a little bit, right? Maybe this is me again complaining about how kind of social media and the algorithms is forcing everyone into really tiny pockets, rather than requiring us to be in a larger room and explore and find what we like and be exposed to things we weren't expecting.
Or is it the other way around where like authors are trying to stand out, so they just mash a lot of things together and like I'm not sci-fi. I'm like you said, that steampunk dystopian, like trying to.
I think there's some of that, especially in like the indie scene, because if you can get that number one, then you can call yourself a number one best-selling Amazon writer, right? Which like cool, right? But
Sure. And people sometimes choose deliberately to put their book in a genre that is not appropriate for it, right? Because it's a smaller genre. But also, and I don't know how this cuts, but those same algorithms have invented genres, right? And I mean, I don't know how much you want to go into like writing in the indie writing scene, but it's birthed things like lit RPG and dungeon core and these genres, which fundamentally, where do they come from? Well, someone writes a freakishly weird book and then it does really well. And as a result, people who are watching the rankings say, oh, well, that's an unserved market. And so a genre comes into being because people emulate that book, right? And you get harem and reverse harem and all this stuff. Anyway, I don't know. That maybe is just a digression.
You would think though, like having a more broad genre would be like, oh, let's cast a wider net, but it seems like it's gone the opposite way a little bit.
I certainly worry about that, right? I would like to reach as broad. I would like Christopher, as Christopher's editor, I would like Christopher to reach as many readers as possible. Absolutely. I mean, I'd love to put a literary cover on, just I don't know, like maybe a son being eaten by a Pac-Man or something, and put it out in general fiction and see how it does.
That would be really funny, actually.
The topic in the comments here that I brought up was Dragon Riders of Pern was one I put on my popular fantasy series I like to read. Oh boy! Apparently, if I didn't call that science fiction, I was just a monster. So, where do you think that comes down? When you got dragons, you got all your typical fantasy stuff, but the dragons are from outer space.
Oh, but you don't know that till like book 5, Mike.
Well, everybody told me that, so I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah, no, Mike. I think you're right. I think like when you said at the beginning, right, that it's like wizards or robots or dragons or robots, right? I think that's what most people like. I think that's the level of resolution most people are thinking about this at, because I think that's what's useful from like a marketing perspective. Because I think it's really down to like, what mood am I in, right? Do I like want to read a story about robots? Do I want to read a story about dragons, knights, castles, right? And I think from a especially from like a traditional bookstore model perspective, right, where someone walks in and says, hey, I am looking for, fantasy books. That's what I'm in for today, right? That way they know not to give you the book about the robots, right? And maybe if you had a book that had castles and robots in it, maybe you're pissed about that this week, right? I think that like people like need the like very broad, simple division just for like taste-making reasons. And then the rest of it, like I hate all these subgenres, right? Because I think for like a normal reader, they're off-putting. I think it sounds like it's difficult. It's I can't remember. I think it's when I just did an interview. I was talking to Stephen Arian, right? And I think I said this on when I was talking to him. I think that you start to sound like a sommelier at like a fancy restaurant, and like people, it's like, oh, this wine has notes of shoe leather and like burnt coffee, and like people like that sounds gross though, right? Yeah. Like that is not appealing, right? People do not want Scotch tobacco ice cream; they want chocolate. And I think that if you just say this book is science fiction, right, or this book is fantasy, and like at most this book is both of those things, I think that's all normal people want, right? Even like normal like serious readers. I think if you go past that and you're like, actually, right, The Sun Eater is a space opera with a sort of gothic, glaze and a cyberpunk reduction and a side of like, Roman historical fiction.
You forgot people tentacle horror,
right? Yeah, and of course, don't forget the tentacles. Get the calamari appetizer, right? People are like, I don't know what like half of that means. This book is not for me because that sounded hard. And even if the book is hard, right? Like, it is not in your interest as a writer to make the book sound hard unless you're Gene Wolfe, right?
Or it sounds
Stephen
weird.
Erickson.
Mhm.
Or it sounds weird, right? Like if you're not a gamer, it's not immediately clear that dungeon evokes something that's fun that you want to go do, right? Like if you're not a gamer or you're in certain kinds of, social groups that meet in hotels, right? Dungeon does not sound like, oh, I don't want to do that. Lit RPG is not, there's not a word in there, right? So I mean, maybe those are branding problems, but yeah, I think they've developed followings, but I think sort of the general reader, it's tough to see those appealing.
Yeah. 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 So there, I guess, there are like two conversations we've been having, right? And like one is this one, which is like, what do people mean when they say these things? And the other one is like, what is the spiritual difference, right? Which is maybe the hemisphere thing. And, on that second question, I could sort of, I see, a case for both arguments, right? That they are the same thing actually, right? They're serving to scratch the same itch in a reader, right? It's like, speculating about something, or like, imagining, or some other world, or, exploring like what is a vampire? What does a vampire like mean, right? Because people take that stuff like really seriously, right? Like I'm always like sort of surprised when readers take the stuff that I've made up more seriously than I do, right? And like, so that stuff matters, like even when it's like obviously nonsense, right? Like vampires do not actually exist, right? But like stuff that's like kind of like vampires exist, right? And like, people in the audience have probably dated one, right? So like it's important to read, stories about these things so that, you have a vocabulary for like navigating real life. Like this is what mythology does, right? It teaches lessons, right? Even if you don't believe in it literally, it imparts meaning to you and helps you navigate the world. And in a lot of ways, right? Like all fantasy and science fiction is like a synthetic mythology, right? It's especially like if you're Tolkien, right? Like that was Tolkien's bespoke goal, was to create a mythology, I think it serves to scratch that, same itch, and serves that purpose, right? To sort of give people this sort of symbolic language for understanding their own lives in like a fun, cool way with knights and dragons and robots and stuff, because those are also just neat. And like people would rather read that than like read a blog post, right? Is the thing. That's why those jerks don't just write a blog, is they know no one will read it. But if they put a robot in it and have the robot recite the blog post, then they'll read it, because people are fooled. They come for the robot and they're like, "This is a lecture on why I should stop buying soda bottles. I knew it."
See, this is why the Butlerian jihad just had to happen. See,
yes, yeah, yeah. Amy's got a question for us. Are these subgenres taking the place of book blurbs? Like in the sense of like advertising to readers. Like I don't know about taking the place, but they like serve the same purpose, right? Like
they did that like back with Crichton back in the day. It's like, oh, he invented the techno thriller, right? And it's just like, they've been doing it for a while. It's not like something that's just happened, recently.
I think he popularized it. I don't think he created it. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it helps, like, especially like the Amazon algorithm, like sort books and push them to people, right? Because, you get those emails. It's like, oh, you bought Red Rising. You may like his other book, Empire of Silence, right? Because of course, Mike knows that we're the same person. So I'll just own up to it. Like you get those emails, right? Those are all done automatically. It's not like there's a dude in Amazon who's like reading your purchase history and is saying, like, "Hey, you should really like read this book, man." Like that, right? Like, for that sort of treatment, you have to go to an independent bookstore. But
I'm just glad to know what me and Treebead do could be done by an algorithm, is what you're telling me. Okay.
Only that it is, not that it could or should be done.
Oh, plot twist! I am an AI. Ha ha!
I knew it.
I haven't been here the whole time.
Yeah, I have no proof that either. Actually, I know that Dan exists. He came to the Ashes of Man.
Hey, we got lots of good conventions in Houston. I invited you to one. No.
Yeah,
you had to go
I
and have
had
a baby or something.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. What a fool I was. Yeah, no, I need to get out that way. But yeah, no, I mean, I think they are fundamentally a marketing tool, right? And I think that, if nothing else, it provides writers with an excuse to go to conventions and sit on panels and discuss what grimdark is, for the 8 billionth time. Which is what would
it's
they
nice to be
do?
invited to this conversation, not another one about what actually is grimdark.
What is grimdark? How is grimdark? Yes.
Why is grimdark?
Yeah.
Why is grimdark? Yes, that's gonna be my next. That's gonna be my next stream. Why?
So,
is
guys, you got it here first. Next book by Christopher after Sun Eater, Grimdark Fantasy.
Is going to be grimdark. Fantasy.
Why is grimdark?
Why is grimdark? Yes. It might be more fantastical with whatever the next thing is. I'm not going to say how fantastical it'll be, but it's a possibility.
Aha! See, we're doing fantasy We're doing fantasy robot dragons. Here we go.
That would be pretty metal, though.
Robot
actually.
dragons. Yeah.
The books need to look like power metal albums from 1985.
Just get any Dio album cover. You're good. You're good. Dio and Armored Saint. That's the way to go, right there.
That would be pretty epic. So
I'd buy it. I'd do a cover buy for sure.
Yeah, let's yes, and they're gonna have that same vibe, right? It's gonna, every Dio song is actually science fantasy, right? So,
this is maybe one thing that does separate the two are the book covers. Like, are you drawn more to sci-fi or fantasy covers when you're walking down like those book aisles?
Well, it depends on the author. I will say, like, when I was younger, I always, because I grew up Star Wars, I always reached for the one that had the spaceship on the front over a dragon. I mean, I love dragons, don't get me wrong, but I mean, again, Star Wars was my birthright. I mean, that was just like everything to me, so that was my religion. So again, but then you see Christopher's got a bomb ass artist. I'm picking that one up because for the cover. I mean, honestly, that was what made me start Empire of Silence when I did, was because of that cover. So Christopher was pretty nice. We talked about Dune for a while, so give this guy a try, even though I can't pronounce his name.
It's okay, nobody can.
Rufio.
Yeah. Man.
It was Durfee. Durfee told me how to say it correctly.
I've said this before. I unironically Brian, so many beers, because of all of the times I have not had to tell people how to say my name, on here, or just in author land in general, because I was really dreading it. I actually originally asked my editor if I should do a pen name. I kind of sometimes I wish I did, because there aren't a lot of Ruocchios, so I'm easy to find, but she was like, look, if Paolo Bacigalupi can make it work, you're fine. Name's not as then
you would have just be like CJ Ruocchio or something like that, or
yeah, perfect. Yes, CJ Rock. Yeah. Man, if you knew how many PE teachers called me Rocky growing up, it was all of them.
Yeah, because you were 6 when Rocky 4 came out, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Were you born? Shit, I don't even know.
I don't know, actually. Let's find out.
The day we were talking
there's
about
a great comment here, though.
Lord of the Rings movies were great, and someone was like, "Oh yeah, man, I saw the first one when I was 6," and I was like,
"Oh shit!
All right, I gotta go. See you later."
Yeah, that makes
I
you
was
feel
older. Yeah.
Yeah, Rocky 4 was
objectively the best
85. That was well before I was born. Yeah, no.
CJ Tearjerker.
CJ Tearjerker.
Too soon.
You gotta get the J in there, though. It's required. Or 2 R's. Those are the rules.
You could have just called yourself Christopher Rothfuss, because apparently,
Yes, I can grow my beard. Dan will finally be happy with me.
So that. And you're nice to your readers, so there's that as well. So.
Yes, yeah. Being nice
book
is
5. He wasn't nice to the readers.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, not with the content, but when
the books are not nice.
How is the next book coming along? You never tell them, go jump in a lake.
I think I've had more emails from you, Christopher, in the last 2 weeks than anyone else.
Yeah, there've been a lot of emails, so sorry about that. There's just been stuff happening. My rule is I send one a month, or if something new comes out, and there's been a lot of stuff new coming out.
Just right click, mark as spam. You got to worry about it anymore.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
It just keeps
please
me like reaching for my credit card. It's like, oh, I guess.
Well, I did see the one today about the what is volume 3 going to be a hardcover release again, like before? Is that what that email was saying today?
Within Derrida?
The like new collector's edition?
Yeah.
Yeah. We're gonna do like the smaller ones. Oh, they're over there.
Yeah, I saw that email today, and I was like, damn it, because last time I had to pay more for shipping than I did for the book, and I'm sure I will this time too. So
that cover looks to me, though, Christopher.
They're UK based, right? So it's just.
And plus, they're always like, we got to talk to the author, make sure you are who you say you are to get a matching number. So, I have to confirm my identity. It's like 2-step authentication.
Oh, that's because I gave you one of my copies.
Yeah, you gave me the first one, and then just to get a matching number.
So they're like, so
we
I
don't
actually
have you as that person. Are you telling the truth, sir? I'm like, yeah,
I forgot about that. Yeah. So actually, one of my like author copies that I get now is not numbered. I get like a stamped one, because I get like an extra instead of one of the real ones now.
Hey, here's a question you haven't gotten. When's the Kickstarter edition coming out?
So that is a good question. The interior pages should be done next week, as Steve said. So we're almost done. My calligrapher, who was doing a bunch of like imperial, writing and a bunch of Jadian writing for the cover title page, sort of Lord of the Rings style. Was supposed to take like a week and took like 2 months. And so that was a big problem. So that has slowed things down a little bit.
It's literally like the emperor in his own story. Yeah, my calligrapher. He's taking forever.
They had me pick out a scene in that book to make art out of, and apparently the artist liked it so much they want to put it on the end paper now. So
well, it's on the jacket actually. The scene that Mike picked out is on the front cover flap actually.
Yeah,
when you on the dust jacket. Yes, that is true.
Sweet.
Yeah, so it's that one, and then the Mike's is on the front flap, and then the back flap has got the Olerin fighting the Sealson art on the back. So, and they kind of go together. They like tell a story between the two of them. It's pretty cool. So we're almost done. The jacket is basically designed. I'm driving my wife crazy. She's doing the cover design. Getting the like text and stuff done, and I keep having like tiny changes because I keep staring at it obsessively to make sure it's perfect.
Do they do like a final cut before you get this? Before you say, okay, this is this. I mean, when you get to see like a proof, whatever things like before they say, okay, take it to multi-production.
Exactly. Okay. So we're about ready to do that.
Cool.
So
you can send me that one when you're done with it. It's cool.
Yeah.
No, the proof. Send that to me.
Yeah. I don't know actually if I'll get a physical proof, but I'll get to like review the pages and stuff.
I'll just be waiting for my particle blade. It's cool.
Yeah, that's in the mail. It's right behind you actually. So that'll be soon. We're gonna get the posters and like the cards and stuff printed this month too, and kind of get everything ready. There's a chance that like the slipcases don't get done by Christmas. That's like the big they take forever to make. So if that happens, everyone will get a late Christmas present instead of an early one. We're pretty close. All the art's done. It just especially the color stuff. Like it's all really good, but like the end paper's Coliseum fight scene, it's super cool. So I can't wait to show everybody. And then we're gonna start book 2 like pretty much immediately.
Seeing that one that I came up with the idea of seeing it go from like storyboard to sketches to final product's been really, really cool.
Yeah, that's my favorite part of like the whole just like being an author in general, because like I've always Daw and Bane both have let me sort of stick with Kieran and like really bother him about getting the covers right. To the point where I think I drove Bane crazy because I was like, the fonts are not the same. Someone, and by someone I mean 80 people, will email me complaining about this. You have to spare me.
Hey, just make the spines line up. That's all. It can't look. They don't have to look exactly the same, but just make them line up. That's all.
Yeah, I think the real kicker though is Bane hardcovers are a 1/4 inch taller.
Oh no!
and they can't change that. So everybody's going to
lose their mind. Yeah.
So that's gonna be a whole thing. But yeah, they're pretty much ready to roll. And then I'm gonna bother James about the cover for Howling Dark, which I'm really psyched about. That's gonna be really fun. I love I love the the old Star Wars look, right, Mike? That was like that was books for me as a kid, the same way it was for you.
Drew
Right?
Struzan, yeah.
Yeah. So being able
Brilliant.
to sort of riff on that has been really fun.
I mean, I will say that's big shoes to fill, though, to replace Kieran's cover for Howling Dark, because like that is like the best sci-fi cover, I think.
Is pretty cool. So,
It's really cool.
I'm really hoping, the books get like weirder as they go on, right? Like each book, the universe gets a little bit stranger, and so I'm hoping the covers will also sort of be able to walk everybody through that in a way that
I'm interested in that. Why? That's what do you think makes it stranger? Why do you say that?
I think things just
Because he adds tentacles.
The tentacles
more.
the tentacles get added. See here. Hold on one second. Jose, here is exactly what I was talking about. Right? I know that you can't handle it. I'm really sorry. All right, I did everything I could to get everything to match.
The tales from the Sun Eater collections are already smaller than the regular books, so you're killing us, Christopher.
It was all my fault. Right? But I did my best. It's it's a miracle we got everything else to match as precisely as we did, right? But there's just nothing you can do about that.
Not with that attitude.
But like, no, actually, I think the answer to Dave's question about the weirdness is like kind of goes back to the genre thing. I think just like as the universe opens up, there's an opportunity to put in stuff that like doesn't fit in people's like normal conception of like what a space opera is like.
So I mean, it gets more science fantasy.
It gets more fantasy, I think, period. Is it magic? I don't know. It's pretty close. So this is why I've always like just tried to keep it pretty simple, with the pitch and say science fantasy is, I want to like set people's expectations, but I don't want to like freak people out by like saying too much, right? And also like to say too much, right? To say like, oh, we got cosmic horror and we've got cyberpunk is like to start to like tell people too much, I think, too, right? I mean, I just did, obviously, but we're an hour and a half in, so like, I'm not spoiling anything to people who didn't know anything, but like, I think that especially with like longer series, you have more room to sort of blur those lines and stuff like that. Jose, I didn't mean to like bully you, by the way. I just like, this was exactly the sort of thing I was trying to talk to Bane about, where that was maybe responding to Zin there.
Don't let him fool. Don't let the nice guy facade fool you. He's totally a bully, guys.
I am. I'm the worst, actually.
Those aggressive emails the last few weeks. Jeez.
It's me, Patrick Ruffus. You thought it was me. Pull off my mask again. How many of these am I wearing? I think that the series has like more room for like extra genre invasions the longer it goes on. It'll be, given a long enough, word count, I think like any story will eventually end up with like a cowboy in it, right? Just because like,
okay, but wait a minute,
you got to get there eventually.
So I've read book 6.
Yes.
Probably most people here have not read book 6. I've read it twice.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Did it go anywhere different from where you thought it would go when you were conceiving this series earlier?
Sure. Yeah. That like big thing that they like fight in the first part of the book?
Okay, yeah.
Well, like that wasn't in the plan. That happened because that happened because Dawn made me split books 4 and 5. So I'm like, I need more stuff to like adjust for the split they made me do. So I had to like add stuff.
Okay.
You guys are giving me FOMO. Like,
yeah, that's
okay. But like the big sequence, like in the place where he meets like the thing.
Yeah, that was like not exactly the way. That was not originally like part of the plan. I also like.
It seems to follow to me very naturally from the first book. It doesn't seem to me to be like a sort of nailed on,
Well, thank you. I mean, I thought I was writing a 4-book series, right? And that didn't happen. Yeah. So, things change, right? And you sometimes have to like, make adjustments. And like you could do it badly and say somehow Palpatine returned. Or you can
gotta read
like
2 comics to understand the movie.
Right, you have to read the art book. You want to know where all those other Sith in the Colosseum came from. You got to read the art book. It'll explain everything. I promise. Dave Filoni's a genius. You just don't understand. He's a bigger fan than you are. Mandalorian's not slow. It's like a samurai movie. You just don't like samurai movies. Guy who owns all the Zatoichi films. Zatoichi's not a samurai, but you get the point.
Sun Eater's not science fantasy. They all start like a James Bond movie. Like,
yeah, they're actually Cold War thrillers in disguise. So like, no, things have changed. I also like, there are whole things I didn't like quite had decided like how things were going to work yet. So like how the thing, Dave, in that first part works.
Yeah.
As far as physics are concerned, that was like, I hadn't worked that out yet.
You're working that out as you went. Yeah.
It got like, that's why it was such a headache, is because like I hadn't figured out how I wanted to make it work. Is this like annoying everybody else yet? Like, Mike's like checked out. He's like, you jerks. But
it's very soon. It's coming very soon.
It's April, isn't it though? Like,
Disquiet Gods. The e-arc will be like tomorrow or something.
Yeah, well, the e-arc will be out in January. Yeah, so if people want to read it digitally with like some typos in it, but like 3 months early, like I'll let y'all know.
I'll be trying to get my hands on that. So
no, Bane sells them. You can just buy them. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Bane is the only science fiction publisher that sells their advance copies just so people can read them.
I'm on Bane's mailing list where they just send me books every month. So.
Oh, cool. Yeah, you'll get the book that way. You don't even have to buy it if you're getting like everything.
Well, I'm gonna buy it. Like I'm gonna support you, Christopher.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah. But, plus, I got to make you write something really ridiculous when you sign it. Like
that's true, Mike. You are a golden god. Yes.
Yeah, I was there. Remember when you were signing Mike's book for number 5? Like, oh god, look what Mike wrote.
I think he'd actually do it.
Yeah, why would I not?
I don't know.
Yeah, no, man. That was Dan was there. That was killing me though. There were like 200 of them, and like people were like, I don't know, think of a line. I'm like, I don't have time to think of a line.
Dude, I've seen this thing where these guys for a broken binding, and they're like making it like a contest who can sign like the insert pages the fastest, and they're signing like 500 pages in like 12 minutes. So I'm like, dude, I would die.
I cannot do that. I do not have the dexterity. Like I'll just like crumple all the papers. It's
I would just look like a doctor's prescriptions. Like,
so I just got Joe Abercrombie's like finally got his.
Oh yeah, it's like a swirl. Yeah.
Oh, it's like
a wavy line.
Yeah, I could have done that. Yeah.
They all like. Yeah, people's other signatures tend to like simplify over time. I have a signed copy of Sailing to Sarantium, and I posted a picture of it, and Guy K was like, "Wow, yeah, my signature does not look like that anymore."
Yeah, you do have a nice signature. You're like all get flowy with it. That's going to be hard when you get to those big. You need to do a signing up here in Canada, though, Christopher.
I did one. I know
you did, but I mean, like book 6 and like 7.
Yeah. Oh, that would be cool. Dave,
it was rough. It was a rough signing too.
Yeah, it was not a good time. I think
you went to like the wrong coast, right?
That's true. That's true. Although if we did this time, like maybe Jake could come by, but
we go to Newfoundland.
We were in Vancouver and like nobody came. It was.
And then the bookstore ripped us off.
I forgot about that part.
How we brought our own stock because they didn't have any, and we put it there, and the bookstore took it, but then told us we would just get paid our regular royalties. I was like, this is not how it works. You just took my copy of the book.
The chapters?
12% when you sell it. And they stopped replying after a couple of rounds of failing to understand why they had just stolen like $200 from us.
That's rough.
Yeah. It's your big national bookstore chain too, Megacorp. Shame on them. Mm-hmm. I won't name them here, but you know who I'm talking about.
I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Yes. Purple.
Yeah.
Mauve. Yeah. Violet. Yeah, that one. Yeah, I forgot about that part where they
I have not forgotten. The injustice rankles me, Christopher, to this day.
They don't even sell books now. I think they just sell like tea and like Lego.
Yeah.
I think like
yeah, Barnes and Noble is mostly
Stores sell
going the same
coffee.
way. Which
Coffee
is like
sells.
fine because there's only one Lego store in town, so like I can I don't have to go as far to get Legos. But yeah, no.
I was thinking with like the kind of going back to the discussion of like sci-fantasy. I think like sci-fi has greater opportunity to be scary, like scarier than fantasy sometimes. I think because like space inherently is terrifying, right?
Sure.
And I think sci-fi can lean more into that than fantasy can. And like, I don't know, maybe get your guys' takes on that.
Well, fantasy usually has big, scary, giant, hairy spiders, and that's terrifying to me. But I gotta think, space. It's literally is like fuck around and find out. With space. It's like we're watching For All Mankind, that show on Apple TV, which is great, by the way. Ronald D. Moore, who did Battlestar Galactica. But anyway, watching that, like, it's like every episode, like something catastrophic happens, like because space don't fuck around. It doesn't play. So yeah, it's inherently scary, and that's before you add, the unknown, alien life, and things like that in there. So yeah,
I think fugue. The idea of fugue terrifies me, and like that's just a simple thing. Is like, oh, going to sleep.
I thought about just like killing a major character like through a random like technical fault, just like oh, they didn't wake up this time, couldn't get the blood in. It's just
like in Planet of the Apes. Make sure you put that in your works cited.
Yeah, exactly. That would have taught everybody a lesson. But I thought that would be like too anticlimactic, and everybody be like, "Christopher, you're a jerk."
Yeah, instead he just starts book 2 with all this times went by and figure it out.
Yeah. You look, you figured it out. Everybody's fine. Everybody likes Howling Dark. I just only.
Did you ever do that? Or are you ever going to do that, Christopher? Like someone's just drawing like mustaches and like eye patches on somebody in fugue, like on the glass, just.
That's great, actually. Yeah, I should totally do that. That sounds like something Polino would have done.
For sure. I think I suggested you one time, like you got to have someone drawing boobs on someone in like the fugue, like and the the eye patch and then the teeth. Like
it's got to happen. We'll go back and do that. But yeah, no, I think that but I think that science fiction is maybe scarier on balance for two reasons. Like maybe in fantasy, the heroes have like maybe not more agency, although maybe more agency is the right way to put it, right? Because like a wizard knight is going to be more able to handle a dragon than like an engineer is able to handle the vacuum of space, right? Like I don't know, Space Cthulhu or something, but it's also maybe like science fiction is like supposed to at least theoretically be plausible, right? Possible. In a way that like there are unfortunately not really dragons, right? Unless you like live in Komodo and they're kind of small, right? Or Louisiana, crocodiles. But like, space is real. Aliens like could be real. Like we could get hit by a gamma ray burst like right now, and we would never see it coming, right? Like it's actually impossible. And so like that stuff's scary. But
greater scope for fear too, right? Like, like in fantasy, we're dealing with this one dragon that'll burn down this one kingdom, but like, we in sci-fi, we have a weapon that can destroy planet after planet after planet, right? Like that, it just has this greater scope of like carnage and fear, and that's kind of one of the things I like about it too, as well. Like that really sets it apart from the fantasy. In that sense.
Yeah, but it's better than Death Stars. Ships that had many Death Stars on them.
1 million of them. Yeah, I thought for a minute they were like gonna borrow the Katana fleet plot point from Zahn, and I was like, like they could. Yeah, no,
they
jumped the shark. You're Catherine Kennedy. We don't have all this.
We don't. Right, we don't have books. They don't exist. Like one of the
right. Yeah, although these are legends. Throw these away. Yeah,
these are man, Tim is such a good sport about that stuff though. He's like, you never know, they're legends, right? Like,
dude, I'd like to get Timothy's on off record to literally let me know how he feels about this watered down version of Thrawn that they're doing. I would love to hear him like off the record say what he thinks about it. I would.
I don't know. I like the new books that he did. I thought they were pretty good. Still, I mean, Tim's a great guy. What's that?
say on his deathbed, so there can be no consequences.
Yeah, no, I don't
yeah.
want him. I don't want him to let
Fire
go of
him,
that
I'd be
paycheck. Like
real
I said,
careful.
I want these guys to get paid. I don't want them to let go of that paycheck. I'm just saying that, like,
Right.
Yeah.
I'd like to know his real
He's a
feelings
real
about it.
pro though. I liked him a lot.
Because there was like, oh, I can't wait till they bring Mara Jade on. I'm like, why? So you can hate it? So you can hate what they do to the character?
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Yeah, this is the deep problem with like all of the stuff, including the show I'm still watching, Mike, is that like is that what they're trying to do is like justify the bad decisions that they've already made. So like all Dave Filoni's job is to like make stuff so that like people who really know every little detail about Star Wars can say actually Rise of Skywalker makes sense now, because if you watch this show, it will explain, the movie. Like, no, that's it can't flow uphill like that. It needs to. The movies need to justify the smaller material.
The only reason I say that is because I was guilty of this too. As I said, that if you watch Dave Filoni's Clone Wars, you felt like, okay, I actually believe that Anakin and Obi-Wan were actually friends now. Because if you just watch the prequel movies, you're like, two act like they hate each other. So it fixed that problem. So I think that everybody uses that excuse, everything now. Anything Dave Filoni touches, like, oh, well, it explains this and it explains that, and it makes this make more sense. And I'm like, ain't nothing fixing that. I'm sorry, nothing.
Yeah, he's just the great explainer. I will say, the one thing that like really bothers me is that like Ahsoka is actually the most important Star Wars character now, right? Like she knows like every major character, and they all just think she's the best. It's like literally that Star Trek fan fiction that Mary Sue is from. Right, where like all the Star Trek characters are like, she's the best person on the crew. I'm like, why have we never heard of you actually? Right? It's that meme where it's like, oh, Ahsoka, yeah, Obi-Wan told me all about you. Right? It's like, what did he say? And I won't finish the meme, right? Because the greater point is like, you didn't say anything actually, because like you weren't a real character until later, right? Like
self-fulfilling prophecy.
Like it's weird that she doesn't come up, right? It's like that's not how you like add stuff in, but that's like a whole nother topic. I did want to say vis-a-vis the horror question though, right? Like this kind of, I think, helps get at the relationship between science fiction and fantasy in an interesting way. Because horror really is like the third sibling in that family, and like everyone acts like it's a distant cousin. And like that's one that's not fair, right? Because it's a great genre, right? But it's easy to see how like horror can sort of fuse with fantasy or science fiction, I think in a way that like is less clear to people, right? When we talk about science fantasy, right? It's like less obvious that robots and wizards can hang out than it is that like either space or dragons can be scary, right? And so I think that like the relationship horror has with both of these things, right? It's like Lord of the Rings is frequently actually pretty scary, right? Like the actual book, like
Sure.
Gollum following them. The ring
The
raid
Jackson
sections.
movie is really made clear, right? Like
Shelob.
Shelob, yeah, right. Yeah. And this is one thing like Tolkien does not get enough credit for. Like he's genuinely frightening in passages, right? And like in a really effective way, and without being like grotesque or obvious. Like it's very understated. Like the ring raids, like coming into Crick Hollow and scaring
Dead is really, really creepy.
It's terrifying, right? Yeah, like, but it's like the epic fantasy novel. Right. And so you've got horror playing this like grace note role in Lord of the Rings. And there's no reason, right? This is why, get back to Jared's point about them like kind of being all the same thing, right? That science fiction can't be, a grace note element in a fantasy story like with the Tim Powers book, right? Or vice versa. I like when I like when these sort of boundaries between these genres are transgressed, right? Like it's like, oh, you thought you were in. That's why it's Sunny Just the way it is. Like you thought you were in a normal space opera. Actually, it's this thing. No, actually, it's this thing. Actually, it's like all of these things, right? And I think that obviously the boundaries between these things are way more porous than they feel when you're in the aisle in Barnes and Noble and you're like, I want wizards today, bro. What have you got, Mr. Bookseller? I just So I think maybe science fiction is scarier, but like they all can be scary.
I like you saying that horror is like the distant cousin or whatever. I always said that horror is treated kind of like heavy metal music is, and that the snobs try to pretend like it isn't an actual genre. Nobody really actually cares about that except you delinquents and stuff. So
Yeah. Well, but the same people who say that are like, but Frankenstein, Frankenstein, what a superb work of literature. Dracula, what a great masterpiece of English literature, Irish literature, I suppose. But then like, yeah, horror is bad. Literature professors are silly, right? Because they'll, like, science fiction, terrible. But then, like, I said last week, like, cyberpunk was like really a like thinking man's science fiction genre for a while there.
See, but
that
then
was
you couldn't be a fantasy reader, not like heavy metal music in the '80s. So I mean, it just kind of
right. Yeah, they go hand in glove. Yeah,
Guess that wasn't a good comparison after all.
but no. But like, I think you're right. I think that like everybody sort of looks at horror like it's this like redheaded stepchild genre, and it like it's clearly of a piece with science fiction and fantasy. Like they all belong together, right? And like look at the Lovecraft stuff we're talking about earlier, right? Like Lovecraft was a fantasy writer in his day. Like that's how people thought about him, and like that has since changed. Like calling him a cosmic horror writer is an anachronism, right? Like I don't think he ever heard the words cosmic horror.
Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard used to share the same pages in Weird Tales magazine. So yeah.
Right. Well, and also like the people of like, Stygia and Koth like worship eldritch gods, right? Like Conan frequently is like butting heads with people who basically worship the gods from Lovecraft, right? Not by name, but like there was this sense that like those guys were all kind of writing stories that like kind of loosely fit together, but like the noise that Shoggoths make is from an Edgar Allan Poe story, right? Like the whole Tekalili thing is I can't remember the Poe story's name, but Lovecraft read a Poe story about an Antarctic expedition and like included that as a reference to it, and then he didn't put a footnote in. What a jerk, but like there's a sense that like it all went together, right?
Well, they were pen pals. Robert E. Howard and H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah. There's a book of their letters too,
Yeah.
which if you've never read is fascinating. Really interesting friendship there. But I think Lovecraft is the most prolific letter writer that we have the letters of in the English language. I think he like wrote, I think something like 10,000 letters, maybe I'm missing a zero somewhere.
Yeah,
but
I'd read that 100 times before I'd read Moorcock trashing Tolkien again.
Trash Tolkien again is, oh man, don't start Dave Orme on Epic Poo. We'll just make Liam sad.
I'm not gonna lie, that's a big reason why I've never read Michael Moorcock.
Yeah,
I have Elric books, but I'm still just like, fuck that guy, man.
Yeah, okay, it was 100,000 letters. I knew I was missing a zero. Yeah, there we go. But
if you didn't like that essay, you're not going to like Elric, right? I mean, Elric is the anti-heroic character. Elric's designed to be an argument against the sort of chivalric, aristocratic virtues of Tolkien's characters.
Well, I think that for example, Tolkien didn't like Dune, and he wrote a really nice letter, the nicest way you could possibly say that you didn't like a book. And I was like, there's a way to do that. There's a way to do that without being Philip Pullman taking a shit on C.S. Lewis, without being Michael Moorcock taking a shit on J.R.R. Tolkien. There's a real nice way you can go about saying, hey, this is why I don't like this. This is my deconstruction of it, without just being a complete asshole.
Right. You don't have to call Tolkien a fascist, right?
Totally agree. I'm with you. I'm just saying you're not going to like Elric.
See, that's the thing is, I love Robert E. Howard, and everybody always says, "Oh, you love Conan. I think you'd really like Elric." So I'm like, "Oh, really? Okay." Well.
Yeah. Elric is like the send up of the Wizard Knight character who, all his heroism destroys everything. He kills everybody, and in the end, he kills himself. Right? I mean, that's Elric, right? That's the argument that all of the heroism in books like The Lord of the Rings is false and destructive ultimately. I'm not saying Moorcock's right. I'm just warning you, if you're going to try and read Moorcock, don't read Elric, you're not going to like it. That's what I'm.
Every time I've considered it, I just go back to that essay. And
yeah, I'm in the same place. I have like the first three. I keep getting them as gifts because like the covers are really sweet.
Right.
But yeah, it's just not not gonna happen. I prefer his plagiarized, rip-off character variant Geralt. So,
Oh, I was thinking of the cover art that rips off John Carter of Mars, but yeah.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I prefer John Carter too. John Carter's my
Carter's
boy.
great.
Yeah,
Porous is great.
yeah, so good.
Was
Now,
it
is that
Moorcock
Porous
originally
fantasy or
off?
is that sci-fi? Because you do travel to Mars, but then it's a very fantasy-like world, but it's got aliens. So where's that?
Yeah,
from?
well, I know Liam is, watching, so I will say it's Sword and Planet, right?
Sword and Planet.
Yeah, but it's both, right? I think like if I were working in Barnes and Noble, I'd call it science fiction, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
Excuse me,
It's on
Liam's gonna say
Mars.
planetary romance. He's pulling a fast one on me. But
It's Conan on Mars. That's what it's like. Conan on Mars.
yeah,
Right.
and also Superman, right?
Yeah.
He travels to Mars, but basically just by going to sleep and waking up there, right? Not like he goes in a spaceship. I mean, it's pretty.
Right.
Yeah. It's funny though, because that's the same way. So like Johannes Kepler wrote a science fiction story called Somnium, right? As in like the guy who like figured out orbits, right? And in it he like falls asleep and like he drinks a potion that like a witch gives him and he like goes to space. This is in like 1650 or something. I forget when, something like that. So it's funny that idea stuck around all that time, right? And that it started that early, because like there's no concept of science fiction at all, right? It's like I point to this among other stories whenever people are like, oh, Mary Shelley created science fiction. I'm like, no, she didn't. She had no idea that's what she was doing. That's silly, right? There are like earlier examples of this stuff. But like Kepler was, he wouldn't have called what he was doing fantasy or science fiction, right? Like he didn't have the vocabulary for any of that. And so like really like what we call it is like a feature of like when we are talking about it, right? Now we can say, oh, actually it's reverse harem cyberpunk, right? Because like all of these like words have been created and so people, have them to use. But like if you go back in time, like he just called the book A Dream, right? So, that was the title. But
yeah, popular sci-fi I want to read. I did have Sprawl, Neuromancer. That's
Oh,
not
yeah.
sci-fi. That's cyberpunk. Okay.
oh yeah, like that's okay.
Scroll. God, I haven't heard that name in a while.
Oh man, Adrian is Severian's shadow self. It might be the other way around, honestly. Adrian's a much nicer man. Astral projection, yeah. I mean that's basically it. Yeah. Yeah, no. Carter's an old Martian name. Yes, Liam. I thought you would appreciate that joke in the new book. Yeah, no. Burroughs like 100% holds up. Like he's super readable.
I was reading them again last year, and I was just like amazed. I was like, "This stuff's coming up on 100 years old," and it feels like it was probably written in the 60s at the latest.
Yeah,
Wow,
he's so ahead of his time.
Prose is so good. And I still haven't read the Tarzan books. I've got the Tarzan collection. I've heard those are just really brutal.
They're also really, really good, man. The ending of that first one is just like it's so like. Well, it's like so Victorian, like it's so like from another time, like culturally, like it's just like it's not an ending that like any modern person would write at all. It's just
keep going back to the adaptation thing. Let me ask you this: how come they've made 1 billion bad Tarzan movies, and 3 years later they'll make another one, but they make one John Carter movie that kind of, well, let's be honest, it flopped, but it was a really good freaking movie in my opinion.
I loved it.
But they're like, oh, they can never touch that IP again because it got poisoned because that movie. Dude, you just made like 2 bad Tarzan movies last year. You already got another one in production. So I'm like, why is Tarzan the one that's like, we can just do that over and over again? Is it because it got Disney fined? Why is it?
Probably that.
Yeah, well, Disney like sabotaged the release of that movie, right? Because they had acquired Star Wars.
Yeah, they got Star Wars,
right?
and they're like, oh,
they were like, yeah, I don't need this, right? It is a shame though, because that John Carter movie is like actually pretty freaking sweet. And they were like clearly setting up to do the rest of them, right? And it would have been great. Like Willem Dafoe as Tarkus, yes, please, right? Like,
The girl who played Deja Thoris was like my fantasy dream for like a decade. So I love that movie.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Yeah, what was her name?
Lynn Collins. Yeah,
Lynn Collins. Yeah, I almost said Lynn Carter. I'm like, that's not right. That's one of the latter day Conan writers. But yeah, no, it's good. Like even Taylor Kitsch is good, and he's Taylor Kitsch, right? Like, yeah, I would
go to my kids. My kids loved it too. So it's just a shame.
I made when you were reading it, I made Jenna watch the movie because she loves Star Wars, but she'd never seen John Carter, and so it was like, why aren't there like 12 of these? I'm like, I know, it's painful. Good news is there are 12 of them. They're just books.
I think it's like with Tarzan though, like it also has that romantic like part of it, and like romance is like the most popular like genre.
Well, now it's got like a whole new life because now it's all about Jane. It's not about Tarzan anymore. So.
Yeah.
Of course, yes. Which I mean, like, that's fine, right? Like, this is a weird analogy, but like, Grendel is cool, right? But because Beowulf exists, so like that book's like, why not have a Jane story?
Hey, what's your preferred translation of Beowulf?
That is it. Dave, do you have an opinion on this? Like, you were like probably more qualified to answer this question than I am.
I'm not more qualified. I've dabbled in Old English.
That's why I don't have version.
Translation. Like I'm trying to think which ones have I read. I've only read. I don't
remember the one that we read in
I've
high
only
school.
read two.
The one that's just got the chainmail on the front cover. That's
Seamus Heaney. That's the one that like everybody reads. I think it's fine.
I did the Tolkien one last year with Philip Chase, and that was you actually understood it, So
yeah, no, I haven't read the Tolkien one yet. And then Liam was saying the one that Shippy just did is nice. So and Shippy's great. So but yeah, Jared's saying
he's Beowulf fantasy or sci-fi.
Amy wants me to write a romance novel. I thought I already did.
You're not wrong.
You're not wrong. But yeah, Jeremiah asked when we're doing the anime series. Man, it'd be so good if only to get made fun of by Mike for having an anime series. So.
Can't wait to hear Hadrian yelling every 3 seconds and laughing like they do now.
There we go.
Anime.
Replay the GIF. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know that it'd be for like, the One Piece demographic, but Liam says Shippy's is better than Heaney's in his opinion. And I trust Liam. So
yeah, Liam will know.
But yeah, no, I mean like the Heaney is like that's the translation that everybody reads, like for school and stuff. So yeah, hard to argue with that. But yeah, I am not a Beowulf expert. I am a Tomato Europe guy, not a potato.
Well,
Europe
you
guy.
guys were you guys spent 30 minutes talking about like dialects, ancient dialects and stuff. So I thought, hey, I actually have some experience in this one.
Yeah,
I've read it twice. So there.
Yeah, no, Beowulf rules, but I don't have the old English background like old Liam here, so
weird they never been able to make a good Beowulf movie.
It is weird. Man, that like CGI one was not it. So
I was actually excited about it, and then I saw it, and I was like, "Wow, did they read it?
Yeah,
did I read it wrong? Maybe I misunderstood the translation.
Yeah,
maybe like, they read a different translation.
It should be good, right? Like you've got Anthony Hopkins, right? Like just like all the the CGI, especially now, like it's basically unwatchable, right? It's just like
what was it, like 2006 or something? Yeah,
it was pretty.
Back in the days where they just it really mattered who the actor was. They didn't really care what the story.
Was that Zemeckis? Did Zemeckis make that movie?
It was Zemeckis, yeah.
Wow, man. So on paper, this all should have worked.
Yeah, damn. You would think, but yeah. And
Angelina Jolie, not what I expected is Gretel's mother, but okay, cool.
Yeah, that was a choice. Has its virtues, but not what I was expecting either. So, or Liam for that matter. So,
sexy. Yeah.
13th Warrior is basically Beowulf. Michael Crichton,
did
Michael
Warriors.
Crichton
Michael Crichton,
version, Ibn Fadlan, and he kind of just mixes it with Beowulf.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no, that
So I say 13th Warrior is probably the best Beowulf adaptation.
And it's
And I
so
know people
quick.
trash that movie. I was like, I find it enjoyable.
Yeah, it's good. That's a decent movie.
yeah, no,
That's a
I
great
really
movie.
liked it. My parents like went through this weird phase where like that was like one of their movies, so they just like watched it like 20 times, and they're like, then they were done with it and put it away.
Yeah, I find that both men and women like Antonio Banderas. It's weird. It's weird how that works. And kids too, because my kids watch freaking the Puss in Boots all the time, so it counts. There we go.
Oh, I thought you were about to say Spy Kids.
Believe it or not, they've never watched that one.
Yeah, those are so weird, man.
Someone's
They're
gonna
so
come
weird.
back around in the comments and say, "Oh yeah," and then Antonio Banderas is a sexy vampire Armand, and we're gonna go right back to vampires again.
Yeah, well, you know, the vampire is, you know, the perfect, you know, case study for this conversation, right? Because they can be science fiction, they can be fantasy.
That's true.
You know, let's, you know, we do whatever we want with those. So, you
Because
know,
I got that when I did Dracula for one of my horror months, and people were like, "Is it really a horror book though? Why is it not fantasy? Why is it not science fiction?" And I was like, "That's just a." I mean, same with Frankenstein. You know, they think it's a horror novel, but it's a sci-fi novel. But it's just, I think a lot of people have only seen the movies, you know, and that's what they kind of draw from it. Frankenstein's a horror movie because, you know, it's one of the universal monsters, and it's like, yeah, but it's not like the book at all. Yeah, it really isn't. I love those movies. I grew up with them, you know, but it's like it's not like the book at all. The book's very much a character study. But then you got Dracula. To me, it's like that's like the horror icon, right? Dracula. I just can't think of that not as a horror
being
book.
as anything else. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, no. But like you can make a case, right? That it's a fantasy novel. It's
Sure.
just like, you know, ultimately, you know, the line really is like which way the bookseller you're talking to in Barnes and Noble falls on a given day. I think, right? Like, you know, maybe they'll be like, oh, you want a science fiction book? And then they trick you and they give you, you know, Dragon Riders of Pern, right? Or like vice versa, right?
That's what someone was saying earlier. It's like they move the goalposts for whatever genre is in right now. So Dragon Riders of Pern was very much a fantasy series, and then they thought, okay, well, science fiction's big right now, so let's just market it as a science fiction book.
Yeah, no, that's like that's totally it. I tried really hard to get Daw to put the fantasy stamp on the spine of Sun Eater, because there were more fantasy readers than there are science fiction readers. But they weren't going for it, despite the fact that like it feels like a fantasy book.
You know what has the science fiction stamp on it? Dune. You know what else has a science fiction stamp on it? Star Wars. So there you go.
Yeah, you know, so they didn't bite.
fantasy.
They didn't bite. Must abolish Barnes and Noble. No, we need them. You know, I would much rather go there than just click a few buttons. But
you know why I don't go to Barnes and Noble? Because I'm sorry, I'm not paying cover price for a book that's 14 years old. Sorry, I'm not. Just not.
Yeah. There is that.
I mean, I respect them for if they can do that and get away with it. And you're profitable. Hey, man, do it. Get your paper. But it's just like as a buyer, no, sorry, I'm gonna go to the.
No, I get it. I remember the ones I had someone message me. I think I got a Reddit message because I did like one AMA in 2018, and occasionally I'll look at people message me because they find like, oh, you've a Reddit account, which I hate because I like never ever check it, right? And it's like, hey, can I buy a hardcover copy? I think this was of Empire of Silence. This was like 2020, and I still had a couple, and they weren't quite gone yet. And I was like, yeah, sure, right? Like, you know, $30 and then postage, right? And I'll sign it for you. And they were like, I can get on Amazon for like, it must have been Howling Dark actually. I can get on Amazon right now for $8. Can you do better? And I'm like, can you get it signed? Like, what are you doing here, right? Because like Amazon will drop the price so low and actually like eat the loss so that they can outcompete, you know, their competition, which nobody else can do, right? So like I have. Yeah, but I don't buy as many books as you do. So, you know, it's I totally get it, but Amazon is also evil sometimes. So, you know.
I'll be one of those who complain about Amazon, then I'll be like, oh, hey, I need to get like, you know, some lens cleaner. I'm just gonna go on Amazon.
Right, it's your Ahsoka, right? Yeah.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
It's like, sorry, I mean, look, you can complain about it, but I'm not gonna lie, just being able to do this right now, and I ain't got to worry about it until tomorrow. It's great, you know. So
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue
Convenience is
convenience, right?
Convenience. There you go.
There's a question I missed somewhere.
Why would we go to where we go for that new book smell? Look, also go into Barnes and Noble. I'm just saying, I just don't
Right,
find
just
anything
breathe.
there. I'll go there and look at it, see what it looks like.
You buy some tea and then leave.
I really have gone in there a lot more recently just to look at manga because their manga selection is amazing.
It's really good. Yeah, it's a real indictment of American comic books.
Yeah, so if all the people are like, oh yeah, the Western comics, they aren't struggling at all. Go into any Barnes and Noble and see like this one tiny shelf, and it's got like the greatest hits like Watchmen and things like that in it, and then you just got rows and rows and rows and rows and rows of manga. So yeah, they're getting guys.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's it's.
Well, no, wait. So I'm curious. So you don't like Moorcock?
I don't know if I do. I mean, as a person, probably not.
Okay, you don't like his deconstruction of Tolkien, at least. But
no, I didn't like the way that he was a dick about it. That's what it was. You can deconstruct it, sure. Deconstruct the hell out of something. That's fine.
Because you like Watchmen.
Yeah, I like Watchmen. Okay. I knew what it was trying to do. I just never look. Alan Moore is probably one of the most unlikable people of all time, but I'm also one of those that can separate the artist.
He might be.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, shoot, read Stephen King's Twitter feed. That shouldn't sound like that should be my favorite author of all time, right? So I've always been able to do that. I mean, I get that all the time. You know, hey, why you talk about Lovecraft on your channel? Lovecraft was such a shitty human being. I was like, man, he wrote bomb ass stories that we're still ripping off today, aren't we? You know, so that's just always the way I've been. So.
Yeah.
But the essay it was more. I didn't care that he was deconstructing Lord of the Rings or heroism at all.
Yeah,
it's a dick about it. That's more of what it was, but.
Yeah, he was also wrong. Tolkien was a monarchist. He was not a fascist. Those are like actually the opposite.
Yeah.
Of one another. So he was not only wrong, but catastrophically so.
I ain't read Zelazny. People have been trying to get me to read Zelazny for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Chronicles of Amber.
Yeah. Oh, you'd like it. You'd like it. It's weirdly comparable to Dark Tower, I think, in a couple of ways.
Wait, didn't you only read the first book?
Yes, but I know what it's about. But I know what it's about.
No, dude, I've read Dark Tower twice, and I don't know what it's about.
Well, I know what's in it is probably more accurate, right? I am
right. No.
You know.
Yeah, probably judging Dark Tower by the book one is.
Dark Tower, it's one of those you've seen the Venn diagram. It's like everything would be in the Venn diagram for Dark Tower, literally everything.
Well, Mike, I'll tell you this though. I saw the movie, so.
Now you're trying to piss him off.
I do that not where you can ask anonymous questions on Instagram. Everybody all the time, what do you think about the Dark Tower movie? They made a Dark Tower movie.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh man. No Game No Life asks a very specific question. Christopher, is the Catholicism in Sun Eater a sedevacantist cult? Earth is destroyed, hence the seat is vacant. Is it? I guess you'll have to see one day. That is a really interesting question, though. Actually, so you'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I guess guys, we've been going a little over 2 hours. Looks like we reached the bottom of the chat. Do we want to start wrapping things up?
Sure.
I'm sure people need to get to bed and stuff.
I think it's important that viewers realize that I'm not any closer to the camera. I'm actually just 4 times bigger than the rest of you.
He's a giant.
I'm actually
Plot
this is
twist.
Dave actually is a giant.
So he's a giant. I'm an AI. You're actually Pierce Brown. So
right. And also Patrick Rothfuss.
Yes. Yeah. All right.
It's probably a good thing you didn't get the fantasy tag put on Sun Eater then, because people would have been.
That is probably true, right? I might be suffering poor Ronnie's fate at the moment.
I mean, his might be earned,
but I have not read it. But I owe him a blurb. But yeah, no. Dave actually is a giant, though. He's 7 feet tall. So this is I'm sure Dave is sick of every conversation that's coming up, but I am a hobbit, so it's funny. Every time Dave and I hang out, the person has to take a picture 2 miles away so that we can both be in frame at the same time.
Well, can I make a request for you, Christopher? Next time you get together with your buddies, your fellow authors at Bain, y'all have a nice little palaver or something like that. get Larry Correa to agree to come on the channel, because I think that would be just a fascinating conversation, but based off of his Twitter feed.
Oh, like have Larry on here?
Yeah.
Yeah, we should totally do
I'd
that.
love to watch that. I think that
Larry,
would be
yeah, Larry's the man.
because there's like a buffer, and there's a Larry Correa who doesn't give a shit about that, apparently.
That is correct. Yeah, no, Larry,
I mean,
Larry's a great guy.
Get demonetized, but still, I would love to hear that conversation.
Yeah, no, he's yeah, no.
I'm gonna be reading it for the first time next year.
Because Dave and me did a talk with him and Steve Diamond about editing that we were supposed to do a part 2 of. So like, I don't see any reason why I can't do it here.
Yeah.
So
I'm reading him for the first time next year. I'm very excited.
oh yeah, you'll dig that too.
I'll be doing the saga of the Forgotten Warrior. That's fun.
Yeah, cool. Son of the Black Sword and sequels.
Yeah, that's my favorite thing he's done. Hard Magic is super good though. If you're ever in like a noir detective fantasy kind of mood, it's like that, but like actually in the 30s and like kind of an alternate.
Bane sent me 4 hardcovers of that series, so that's why I'm going with that one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's a good choice. No,
and I've heard it's great. I've heard it's really
it's super fun. I know a couple of writers I know who hate Larry personally, who read the books to criticize them, and one of them was like, but I couldn't. They were just like actually great. So,
damn it, they're actually good.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. But yeah, guys, thanks for coming on this evening. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your evening, and thank you, audience, for being here. I promise there won't be another one next week. I'm done sending out newsletter emails to everybody. All the books are out. Demon in White is officially out in trade paperback, and then Ashes of Man's coming in December. So the whole series will be available finally in one format at one time for the first time in human history.
If it's not out of stock.
But yeah, if it's not out of stock,
Already.
thanks. Yeah, we'll see. So
hey, thanks all the time for asking me, man. This was fun.
Yeah,
thanks, Christopher.
Yeah, good to talk to everybody again, and everybody else. I will see you again real soon. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, stay well.